Because we have to try to make this work with congressmen coming and going and on video. And but they've had an interesting few days. So we're going to get started now. Our opening prayer is going to be given by Whit Cook. He is the volunteer coordinator for Eagle Forum this year at the legislature. And so we hope you all will become very good friends with Whit, because we need you to work with him. And then after that, we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance and the flag ceremony, and then the national anthem, and the first and fourth verse, okay, is sung by Landon Houghton. So, and the audience is invited to please join in on the fourth verse as directed by Marianne Christensen. So, Whit,
Our Father in heaven, we are grateful to be here this day, and we humbly bow our heads before Thee in gratitude for the many blessings that we have received from Thee. We are grateful for this wonderful country, for this great land that gives us the plenty that we enjoy. We are grateful for our freedoms. We are grateful for the ability to worship Thee as we choose. We're grateful for the opportunity to come together and to learn together, to hear the words that will be spoken this day. Father, we ask Thee, please help those who will address us this day. Please help them to speak Thy words. We pray that those words will touch our hearts, that they will touch our minds, that we may walk away this day knowing how we can better serve our fellow man, to protect our freedoms even more, to be united in our efforts to serve Thee and to draw closer to Thee. Father, we are grateful for the wonderful people who have come before us, who have made this great nation. Please help us to do what we can do to honor their name and continue their legacy for future generations. We pray for these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
the flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Oh, we have microphones, I think. So, David, I have a question. Are we able to see the screen? Okay, that's just what I needed to know. Can't see it up here. So this has been a crazy day, and I want to start out by just, thanking the veterans of foreign war and Craig Thorne for what they've done. Just such amazing people, and to have these beautiful flags up here. Thank you so much for that. It's a crazy morning, starting late. We've never done that before, but we're being forced of it. It's all about what's going on in Washington, D.C. Isn't that always the case? Everything's about going on in Washington, D.C., and we'll just blame everything onto them. So our congressmen are all on planes right now. Well, actually, hopefully 2 of them have just gotten off their plane, because we're going to hear from them in just a few minutes. So we're going to start out just doing the best we can. We're going to move some things up on your program, and I'll tell you as we do that while we're waiting for them to get here. I'm sure they have some interesting stories to tell. It's been quite a week, but you know what? I think it was great, and I am so grateful for those 20 congressmen.
I was just looking at one to the back.
So thank goodness that this happened, that people are standing up for what they believe in, and they're saying, you know what, enough is enough. And we'll see where this leads us. I had all kinds of daydreams about what this was happening. Okay, and what about John? Can you ask him? Okay, so David was just telling me that we've got Chris Stewart right now on Zoom. I thought that John Curtis was supposed to be with him. We're going to find out what's going on there. But and then a little bit later, another hour or so, probably more than that.
So I think they brought the tonic.
Okay. Anyway, we should have Blake Moore will be here, and Burgess will be here. So anyway, let's start. Are we ready, David? Okay, and so we have Chris and John. Okay, we have on Zoom. Are they up there? Okay, we're grateful for them. They obviously have been on the plane for a long time. No sleep last night for those guys, and so as they're getting off the plane and they're zooming into this meeting, and so we'll hear from John Curtis and Chris Stewart, and then we'll go from there.
All right, we can hear you. Can you hear us? Can anyone hear us? Give us a thumbs up. Okay, good. Hey, thanks everyone. Obviously, John and I, it's funny, we laugh all the time because people confuse us, but I'm Chris and this is John.
John.
All right.
No, I'm Chris.
No. So we had a really late night last night, as I think all of you know, and we're both trying to come home and see our families for a day before we come back on Monday. But neither one of us want to miss this group. Gail, you do, as I say to you, every time I speak to your group, Eagle Forum, or every time I see you personally, you do such great work, and we're so grateful for the work that you and the people who work with you do. And for everyone in this room, you're here because you're concerned about your country. You're here because you love your country and you want to fight for your country. And I've taken to tell people, what a great time to be alive. I mean, we get to fight when it really matters. And if you don't think it matters right now, then, you know, you just crawled out from underneath a rock on Mars or something, because anyone who is aware of the world around us at all understands that this is an incredibly important time in our history. And the fight is intense. The fight has become personal in many ways. It's a fight for our children and the things we teach our children. It's a fight for... I see Gail. Can you guys hear us? Are we okay? All right. I'm hoping you can hear me. I'm just going to keep going. Again, the fight is very, very personal for many of us right now. And let me have John say a word or two. Then maybe we'll both tell you a little bit about last night and where we are, and then kind of see where we want to wrap up. So, John.
Thanks, Chris. Good morning. I would echo Chris's comments. We're sorry we can't be with you in person. When Gail reached out several months ago, this has been high on our calendars and something we look forward to. And the second thing I would just say is what a great honor it is to serve with this guy next to me, Chris Stewart. We tease him. He's the dean of our delegation. And he really is a good mentor and a leader to all of us. So, Chris, thank you. It's just an honor to serve with you. It's also an honor to serve in Congress. And before we kind of switch gears and talk about the events of the last few days, I would just hope if you had one takeaway from my message, it's how humbled and grateful I am to serve in the United States Congress and represent many of you back there. And it's Chris and I, well, we've been waiting for you to talk a little bit about the challenge that it is, the challenge to do this right. I think both Chris and I spend a considerable amount of time trying to make sure we're doing this right. And there is no easy path, but it's an honor to be here. And Chris, let's talk a little bit about the last event, the last couple of days.
Yeah. So, you know, all of us have been doing a lot of media, a lot of interviews, and I've been saying for the last, well, from the very beginning on Monday, that Kevin McCarthy would be the next Speaker of the House. And that's a good thing. He truly is a conservative, and he's going to be, I think, an effective leader. But some of the changes that these 20 individuals were looking for, John and I agreed with them. There were 36, probably 37 now, changes to our rules and how we manage our committees and how we manage the conference that were good, that were necessary. And there were things that almost all of us supported. And I have no problem. In fact, I support them in expressing that. And we were saying much of the same thing. But in the last few days, this wasn't any longer a battle over, disagreements over how Congress operates, because we'd all agreed to that. When we voted on a set of rules that I think 90-something% of the conference agreed to. But this morphed into something quite different. In the last few days, it was people going in and demanding, you got to make me a chairman, or you've got to put me on, these exclusive committees, such as John sits on with Energy and Commerce. A very powerful committee that people wait a long time and work really hard to get on. And some of them said, well, I want to skip ahead of people. And that's when they lost the support of many in the conference, when they started to advocate for themselves. I mean, that's just wrong. That's not about our country. That's not about the party. When it becomes about them and their own power, then, like I said, they lose the support of many of the conference. And that's kind of what happened in the last probably 48 hours. But even then, we knew, I think many of us were very confident that Kevin would find a way and that we were able to unite as we did at 2:00 in the morning yesterday.
Chris, that's exactly right. I might point out, if I might, that some of those provisions that I think this group would be very interested in, it'll be part of our rules package when we go back and vote on Monday. One of them that I hear from constituents a lot is, why are we voting on bills that have so many issues in it? And so one of the features of the new rules package is that it will be a single issue bills. And to get an amendment to add something on, it has to have germaneness. It has to have something to do with that bill. Yes, I can. You like that. And so that's an example, I think, what Chris is talking about, of some really important progress that was made this last week. I think you'll also be pleased with the number of the budget issues that were addressed in the way that we budget. And let me give Utah a big shout out here. One of the things that's hard to make any news at all is a provision that on the next appropriations bill that we pass, attached to that will be an amendment that says, if the other bills don't pass, instead of going to an omnibus or a shutdown, that we'll go to last year's budget minus 1%. That's modeled after Utah with their baseline budget. And so what that does, good, I'm glad you like that as well. What that does is, instead of what they do is they get us in the corner with Christmas and says nobody goes home until this passes. We either go into a shutdown or everybody closes their eyes and votes for something, these omnibus bills that you see. Instead, if we're successful at this, it would say, fine, everybody go home for Christmas. Guess what? You're living on last year's budget minus 1%. And in today's inflationary world, that would be like almost minus 9%. So I think, Chris, that's some of the silver lining in what's happened in the last few days. And as Chris mentioned, there's 30-something provisions that are, many of them, equally as important.
Very much important. And by the way, to emphasize this wasn't 20 people who were advocating for these changes. It was every one of us. Yeah. John was, I was, Blake was, Burgess was. Every one of us were supporting these and pushing for these. Sitting on the Appropriations Committee, you can imagine how frustrating it is to have, in one case, in one of my subcommittees, we had 72 hearings starting in February, going through July. And then you get to August and every bit of that work just disappears. And then Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer get together and throw a 4,000-page omnibus together and throw it on our desk and say, you got 4 hours to look at this and then come vote on it. And then they wonder why we vote no. And they wonder why we object to that process. So there's going to be better things. Now, we could talk more about the reforms that are good, but here's the bottom line as well, the good news and the bad news, and maybe a bit of good news and bad news now. We're going to be able to stop some of the most outrageous, horrible things that we've seen from the Democrats in the last 2 years. But it's going to be difficult for us to push our agenda because we're going to pass legislation, but Chuck Schumer is not likely to take it up, and the president's not likely to pass it or to sign it. But it doesn't matter. We still need to pass that legislation. We still need to tell the American people what it is we believe in. And we still need to stop some of the worst ideas and the worst things that we've seen over the last few years.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe I can weigh in on that too, which is one of the frustrations that we had in not picking a speaker, is that we couldn't start on that work. And another important thing that we're not dependent on the Senate or we're president for is the oversight. And Chris kind of alluded to that, but you're going to see extensive oversight from us on committees. Every committee has an oversight responsibility. And one of those provisions that we talked about, which they call a church style committee, I'm not quite, Chris maybe knows where that name comes from, but in essence, it's to look into the abuse of federal agencies of weaponizing the FBI and these other agencies, where we'll be able to get accountability. We'll be able to subpoena witnesses, and we'll be able to have these hearings and hold the administration and these federal agencies accountable.
And that is, I got to emphasize that because it is so important. And as I've talked to you all over the last 6 years, I came to you early in the Trump administration and said, the FBI lied to the FISA courts. The Department of Justice has lied to Congress again and again and again. And the media laughed at us. And people in the FBI and Department of Justice released letters saying these guys have betrayed national security. They are revealing national security secrets. What nonsense. The only thing we were revealing was how deceptive and how manipulative and how political James Comey was, Director McCabe was, the former CIA Director Brennan was, and how in some cases the FISA courts had become corrupt and had been dishonest. And the Church Commission, which actually John comes from, Frank Church, a Republican senator in the 70s who had provisions to reform the CIA, it's another effort like that. These guys have betrayed the American people. They have betrayed you by them essentially saying, we don't care if the American people voted for Donald Trump. We think it's the wrong choice, and we're going to try to undermine him, or we're going to try to make it so he can't get elected. And you should never, ever, ever have elites in Washington, D.C. say to the American people, we don't care who you voted for. We're going to try to make our own change. It's as undemocratic and against freedom as anything we've ever seen.
So if we can have kind of a fun moment here, I know a lot of you wanted Jim Jordan to be speaker. And what was interesting is Jim Jordan kept saying, I don't want to be speaker. Why? Because Jim will be the chair of judiciary. This committee is under Jim Jordan. That should make all of you feel happy tonight when you go to bed, smile, and know that Jim Jordan has the keys to hold the FBI, these other agencies, and the administration accountable. And there's nobody better in Washington, D.C. to put on this. And he'll have this select committee, the church committee, in addition to judiciary that he'll be working for. And Chris, if I could just quickly, this week I had an email from a good friend. He explained a situation where friends of his had a no-knock raid from the FBI where they came into his home without a warrant, came into his home, took things, and left, and he had no recourse. That email that he sent me, I'm going to hand to Jim Jordan, and Jim Jordan's going to have the ability to hold the FBI accountable for those types of things. And that could be your home, it could be my home, it could be anybody's home. And without accountability, that is a really bad place to be.
Yeah. You know, in the middle of this, starting in about 2017, I went to my staff and I went to my family and my close associates, and I said, be careful in anything you say to me or anything you send me on your phone, because it's almost certain that China is monitoring. Well, and John and I are on the China task force. We've been working on that for a couple of years.
Yeah, and so that was, we didn't have the help of the Democrats because we weren't in the majority. Now we're the majority. We can actually make this a bipartisan. Hopefully they'll join us on it. But Kevin McCarthy has articulated three big problems. One, debt. You guys will appreciate that. The other is China. And the third is education. And I think all of those things you guys will relate to. And he's working on the China thing with the special task force.
Yeah. So we're grateful to be here. We're so grateful we have the majority. We're going to do these investigations. We're going to stop the worst of the nonsense. In fact, all of the nonsense. And we're going to be able to say to the American people, this is what we're for. The very first bill we're going to pass on Monday, I think you all will like this, is we're going to defund 87,000 new IRS agents.
So doesn't that sound silly? Like, what could possibly go wrong funding 87,000 new IRS agents? We know exactly what these 87,000 IRS agents would do. They'd come after small businesses. They'd come after you. And so that's our first bill. It'll be actually a lot of fun to pass. 2 points on that. Number one is the IRS only has 70,000 agents right now. It more than doubles them. And the other interesting thing is a lot of our Democratic colleagues are suddenly so pro-IRS. And you know why? Because they view the IRS as being on their team, right? It's another government agency that they think is controlled by the Democrats. I got an idea. Why don't we take some of those 87,000 and hire them to answer the phones for the IRS?
Yeah, there
so you guys
go.
Can get help when you're trying to do your taxes.
Hey, Gail, any questions? Maybe one or two questions from the audience if we can hear them, and then we're going to go jump on an airplane.
Hey, Phil.
Hey, Phil. You know, we can see the audience. We know many of you. God bless you guys. Yeah, it is. It's great.
Okay, so
all right, she takes the stage.
Testing.
Alec. So what we're trying to do now is get these microphones here. So if you have some questions, we need to bring the microphone to you before you ask your question. So is there anybody with any questions for okay, let's see, over here, and then one back there after that. Nola, do you want to come and get one of these microphones and also pass them, take them?
Are there any plans for insider trading?
I'm sorry, say again?
Are there any plans for insider trading?
Any what?
Insider trade. So, you know, that's super interesting. The Democrats were on a bandwagon to deal with that. So first of all, let me say insider trading is already illegal. And there was an act passed a number of years ago that makes that even more tough on congressmen as far as the standards of what's considered wrong and the penalties. And so it's already in place, just needs to be enforced.
I don't have enough money to make any money insider trading anyway, so.
Over here.
All right. Anything else?
Hold on.
We have about 2 more minutes.
Here we go.
All right, we have time for 2 more questions.
We see that there is a lot of talk in Congress, but we don't see a lot of action. For example, we see the January 6th committee that was illegally constituted by their own rules. They didn't have the representatives from the Republican Party, and yet they pushed ahead on their with their efforts to cast dispersions on January 6th. In addition to that, we have McCarthy, who said that there was, he talked to the dissenters and he says, well, what are the things you want? And then he misrepresented their answer and said these people are in it just for their own power. I had talked more about that, but in essence, what I'm asking you is this. We hear words. How do we see more than of action? We have a lot, the whole nation has a lot of distrust for what's going on in Congress. How are you going to rebuild that trust?
Okay, so a couple points. Number one is you bring up something that I think is incredibly important. It's extension of what we've talked about already, and that is the corruption of law enforcement, the FBI, Department of Justice, and others. And we saw that applied to January 6th investigation. I mean, this was an investigation that would make the Russian courts blush. This is an investigation that would have made the East German Stasi's look at it and go, man, those guys did it well. No way in the world was this fair in any manner. We see a lot of talk, but we don't see action. Well, the reason you haven't seen action yet is because we had no power to do anything. Pelosi controlled the House. Schumer controlled the Senate. But that's different now. Now we control the House. And one of the things we're going to be investigating, by the way, is the January 6th committee. Did they illegally issue subpoenas? Did they illegally collect information and private communications from people? And the truth is that they clearly did. And it's just ironic as heck that a committee that is supposedly looking at violations like that are violating people's civil liberties and their private communications in order to do it. So that's on the table, I promise you, as long as, you know, many other important issues.
So I'm going to be the bad guy until Chris, we've got to go.
Yeah.
As much as we love talking with you,
Well,
we love our families and want to catch that plane.
We're going to catch a plane. Hey, we love you all. Thank you. God bless you, Gail, everyone. Thanks for your work. Thank you all.
So we are going to take just a few minutes now and move the flags so that everybody can see the screen. So if somebody could help, Craig, can we put them over here in front? Oh, okay. I'm sorry. We have to use this screen so that we've got PowerPoints today. Now, the next thing we're going to do as soon as they move the flags is we have a video from Senator Mike Lee. He had to be out of town, wasn't able to be here today, so he made a video just for Eagle Forum, just for all of you in the audience today. And so that's the next thing we're going to do. And then we're going to, after that, we're going to have to start moving some of the speakers up. So your program will be just a little off because I believe that both Blake and Burgess, I don't know that they're on the same plane, but they're coming in around 10 and they will come from the airport straight to here. So meanwhile, we'll just change the agenda. Okay, so David, you want to put the video up now from Mike Lee?
Hello, Utah Eagle Forum. I wish I could be with you in person today, but circumstances don't allow it. It's a pleasure and an honor to speak with you after having been reelected. And I want to thank those of you who helped me get reelected. A lot of you have helped me from the very beginning and have been part of the effort to secure freedom in our country for as long as I've been alive. And I want to thank each and every one of you for that. I want to talk to you specifically today about how we navigate all these threats to our freedom, particularly religious freedom. You see, freedom isn't free. It doesn't pass to us in the bloodstream, as Ronald Reagan liked to say. It has to be fought for and won every single day. And it's not always easy because there are a few tendencies that human beings have. Once they get power, they tend to like it. Once they get that power and like it, they tend to protect their power and to expand it. And whenever government expands, whenever it expands its reach, it does so inevitably at the expense of individual liberty. There's no other way around it. It doesn't mean we don't need government. It just means we've got to monitor it to make sure that it doesn't overcome us. Remember, it's there to protect life and liberty and property. Whenever it becomes destructive of those ends, something has gone wrong, and it's our job as citizens to do something about it. Fortunately, our founding fathers put in place a document that carefully balances power against power. It was put in place to make sure that no one person or no one group of people could accumulate too much power, because that's where the damage starts to occur. So our Constitution recognizes the importance of liberty generally by setting up a system in which it separates power along two axes, one vertical, the other horizontal. The vertical one we call federalism, the horizontal one we call separation of powers. It also contains substantive limitations on what government may do. Among those substantive limitations can be found in the First Amendment that protects religious freedom in two distinct ways. First, it stops Congress from establishing a national religion and an official government religion. And secondly, it prohibits government from acting in a way that interferes with the free exercise of religion. Anytime you start to see efforts to encroach on religious freedom, you've got to be worried. But very often the worst encroachments against religious freedom don't start out as encroachments. One of the things that we have to look out for is efforts that incidentally disrupt religious freedom in the name of establishing new rights, in the name of trying to protect someone else, something else, some other phenomenon. This year, in the last 12 months, we've seen increasing threats to religious freedom, sometimes in the form of legislation purporting to create or protect other rights outside of the religious freedom context in a way that can encroach on religious freedom. For example, I have grave concerns about the recently enacted Respect for Marriage Act. This legislation, now that it's enacted and read in concert with several Supreme Court precedents going back to the 1980s and read in tandem with various provisions of federal civil rights law, has great potential to undermine religious freedom. Now, there are those who defended this bill by saying, it's okay, you don't need to worry about religious freedom because this takes care of it. And you don't need to worry about the Respect for Marriage Act because the Respect for Marriage Act specifically says that we're not going to order any church or synagogue or mosque or other religious entity to perform a same-sex marriage contrary to its teachings. But this is an example of how threats to religious freedom are often indirect. They're often something other than what we expect. That was never the threat to begin with, and so when language was added to the Respect for Marriage Act, carving out that recognition, didn't solve the problem. The biggest single problem that I worry about with that legislation lies in the fact that now that same-sex marriage is recognized under law, under federal law, you read those statutes I talked about with the Supreme Court cases that I talked about a moment ago, we have a very serious threat that at some point religiously affiliated nonprofits will start to see their nonprofit status and their tax-exempt status under Section 501c3 of the Internal Revenue Code threatened. This will come about somewhat gradually at first, and then there will be a flood all at once. I don't know exactly how many months or years it might take to come to full fruition, but this is a very serious, very real threat. I worked actively from the moment that bill came into existence and was announced in mid-July, right up until the moment when it unfortunately passed. I worked tirelessly to try to make sure that we had the means to either stop it or alternatively, if it couldn't be stopped, to add language that would specifically prohibit the federal government from taking any adverse action against any individual or entity based on a religious or moral conscience-rooted belief about same-sex marriage, whether for or against. And if you think about it, there's no reason why anyone should be punished for their religious belief about same-sex marriage. There's no legitimate reason why you'd want to give the government the power to do that. I introduced this amendment. I advocated aggressively for it. Unfortunately, it narrowly failed. It wasn't adopted. And even more unfortunately, we ended up having 12 Republican senators who joined with every Democratic senator to get it passed without that religious freedom protection within it. To those who voted for it, I have asked, and I'll continue to ask, why wouldn't you have insisted on the religious freedom protection that I proposed being adopted before you supported the bill? Because if you're willing to support the bill without that, it strikes me as at least a very serious possibility that what you're saying is that you're just fine with the government possessing the power to retaliate against a religious institution or entity based on that institution or entity's good faith religious belief about same-sex marriage. Many of them will respond by saying, yes, but we did also include, in addition to the language saying that we can't order a church or a synagogue or a mosque to perform a same-sex marriage contrary to religious beliefs, we also included language that protects religious nonprofits. Yeah, they sort of did. But if you read the fine print, if you actually read that language carefully, the promise is a somewhat illusory one. It doesn't actually prohibit the federal government from taking that retaliatory action against an individual or entity based on a religious belief if that institution or entity is not itself a church or a synagogue or a mosque. You see, what they left out of that were small business organizations, or more acutely, the small nonprofit operating with a religious belief about marriage. Those are left totally unprotected. So where do we go from here? It's law now. We face it. Well, we've got to be vigilant on this. We've got to continue to sound the rallying cry that we do not want a government that will retaliate against anyone, an individual or an entity, a nonprofit or otherwise, based on a religious belief about same-sex marriage. Look, regardless of how any individual feels about same-sex marriage, I don't believe you can be a defender of religious freedom unless you're willing to work tirelessly to take this power away from government. I had hoped that the election might produce a more aggressively Republican Congress, giving us hope that perhaps in this Congress we could overcome that. It seems less likely now, especially with a Democratic president. But we'll have another election in 2 years where the presidency and control of the Senate and control of the House will all be up. And I think this needs to be a major issue in that election. Look, we've got to secure these liberties. They will not protect themselves. The nature of government is such that it will continue to accumulate power and exercise power at odds with liberty, in this case, religious liberty, unless we stop it from doing so. You are the people who move the movement. You are the champions on the battlefront. I need your help. And I enlist all within the sound of my voice. Please join me in this noble cause. Let's protect religious freedom before it's too late. Thank you very much for your involvement in the Utah Eagle Forum. May Almighty God, even the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, continue to bless the sovereign state of Utah and the United States of America.
Sorry, we are learning a few things about this new venue, and okay. How do I make this stay up? Okay. Sorry. Anyway, new venue for us. We've not been here before. We're learning a little bit about the electronics here and some of the things that we're trying to get done today. And all this confusion with having to move the speakers around. But, I have to be grateful for our good speakers because the ones that are here are willing to do that. So we are going to move now to where you see Representative Rex Shipp. And I want to introduce him by introducing the subject. So David, what's going on? I'm not up there. Great. And I've lost David. Right when I thought we'd fixed all this electronic stuff, we hadn't fixed all the electronic stuff. Well, maybe we'll make this work, and maybe we won't. We'll make sure that yours is working, Rex. Anyway, we're going to be talking, but Rex is the sponsor of the bill that we talk about every year here, and of course that is the bill to ban puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones and surgeries on children, on the youth. David, you created a miracle. So grateful. And so I am going to introduce Rex by introducing the subject. And then he will explain the bill that is this year's bill and all the information and details that you need to know about that so that you can do your part to help get this bill passed. And in the last couple of years, I've had this slide up there and talked about our promise to Utah's children. And we would hope that everyone in this room would feel that way, a promise to Utah's children. What are we promising these children? We're promising these children that we will take care of them, that we'll be there for them, that we'll protect them, that we'll see that bad things don't happen to them, that we'll do all that we can in our power to protect them from some of the horrible things that are out there. It's hard. It's a hard world we live in. But there are some things that can be done. And we've got to do those things. And the issue that we're talking about now and that you're going to hear about from Rex Ship can only be done by the legislature to protect these children. The legislature has to pass legislation this year to protect the children. If they don't pass that legislation, no protection for the children. So I'm going to talk about, what is it? Well, first of all, our job as adults is to protect the children. All children. Our children deserve no less. Will you protect them? So, because the doctors in Utah right now are performing experimental transgender procedures on minor children and calling it health care. These procedures include puberty blockers, gender-affirming hormones, and surgery. Experimental medical procedures that hurt, sterilize, and permanently damage children are not health care. And the legislature has to make that clear that this is not health care because they're being told that it is health care. Unproven hormonal interventions and surgeries that use children and adolescents as guinea pigs, permanently sterilize them, and permanently mutilate their bodies are child abuse, not health care. So the bill that you're going to hear about today, prohibiting sex transitioning procedures on minors, is sponsored by Representative Rex Ship that you'll hear from. And he'll tell you what happens in that bill. And then we're going to talk about what you can do to see that this bill gets passed. So it's going to talk about puberty blockers. What are puberty blockers? Children sometimes as young as 9 years old are taken to adolescent transgender clinics where they are given drugs such as Lupron to block puberty. There's no proof that they're safe. They permanently sterilize boys and girls, and Lupron can cause harmful, sometimes lifelong side effects, and it's very grueling procedures to do these to children. Hormone-blocking drugs used on young boys have been reported to cause the development of their genitalia to be arrested so that when they reach their late teens, their genitalia were the equivalent of a 9-year-old boy, along with the loss of sexual sensation. Cross-sex hormones, that just simply means that young girls are given testosterone and young boys are given estrogen. This is high risk, and that puts the youth at increased risk of heart attacks and strokes and diabetes, blood clots, and a lot of other problems, cancer, along their lifetime. And then it permanently sterilizes the children. Surgery, top and bottom surgeries are being given to adolescents to change their sexual body parts. Girls as young as 12 years old, and now some even younger, are being subjected to mastectomies right here in the state of Utah. And all of these surgeries are irreversible. And the bottom surgeries, of course, render them permanently sterile. We have an epidemic of young people who are deciding they want to live as the opposite sex. They surround themselves with other young people who may be feeling the same way. They support each other in their unhealthy feelings that can lead to decisions to attempt to physically transition to the opposite sex. What are these influences? Well, the social media, mainstream media, teachers and school counselors, we're going to talk about that today, TV, movies, and social contagions. This is what you would see if you looked on the website of the University of Utah Health and their gender clinic that has been there for several years, and many children have gone through this clinic for these procedures. So what do they do at this clinic? Well, some of the things they do is puberty blockers and gender-affirming hormones, and then, of course, they will also arrange for the children to have the surgeries. Right now, the surgeries that they're doing in Utah are the top surgeries, the mastectomies on these young girls, removing healthy breasts from 12-year-old girls. According to the Controlled Substance Database of Utah, that the number of female minors in Utah that have been receiving testosterone back in 2020 was 663 just in that year. We don't have the numbers for the boys yet because testosterone is a controlled substance that has to be reported. Now we know that has increased, and then you add to them what's going on with the girls and the estrogen where we don't have the numbers, and there'd be there's over 1,000 children every year going through this, and probably more if we could ever get those numbers. But for some reason, they don't share those numbers. I think maybe the legislators in this room today are going to want to find out why they won't share the numbers about what they're doing. The concept of changing one's biological sex, of course, is nonsense, as sex is determined by unalterable chromosomes. An individual can change his hormones and levels and undergo surgery to better imitate the opposite sex, but a male is a male on the day of his conception and will remain a male on the day of his death. And that applies to females. Same thing. By contrast, gender identity is a psychological phenomena, not an immutable characteristic and not found anywhere in the body, brain, or DNA. There is no medical test that can detect it. The American Psychiatric Association in the DSM-5 states that females who identify during their childhood as male, up to 88% of them will change their mind. And for the males, up to 97.8%, almost 98% will change their mind. But we're going to mangle their bodies anyway, and then watch them go through the trauma of changing their mind. How can doctors who are pledged to do no harm do these horrible things to children? How can they give them life-altering, dangerous drugs and surgery that will forever change and endanger their lives? What happens when the child changes their mind just to find out that their physically changed body cannot be reversed? What do they do when they learn that they will not be able to have children or a normal physical relationship? What about their emotional and physical health? And people got mentioned parental rights. Well, what about parental rights? Parents should be able to let their children do whatever they want. Well, that's not true. We don't let children smoke or drink or let a 13-year-old marry a 45-year-old man. We don't allow any of those things. And these treatments are far more dangerous and impactful than smoking and drinking. Parents should have no right to do these interventions and surgeries, removing perfectly healthy functioning body parts and consigning children to the dangerous health impacts and suffer the rest of their life. Parents never have the right to mangle their children, have their bodies mangled or sterilized. In fact, Utah law says parents can't sterilize their children. This decision must wait until they are fully mature and can understand the seriousness and significant impacts of these actions. Until then, adults must protect and support them. An alarming number of children are now changing their mind and desisting, and trans youth people come forward more and more as time passes. They bring visibility and awareness to the medical malpractice that's been going on for years. Penny was just 11 years old when she decided that the people online were right, that she was transgender. At 13, she was prescribed hormone blockers. And by 15, she had a double mastectomy. Now at 16, she is raising money for breast reconstruction. Very shortly after the surgery, she said, "My depression got worse. I hated myself as much as ever, leading me to the psychiatric hospital. I had giant scars on my chest and body parts that were gone." And she is now trying to do something about that. It's time to shine the light of day on these horrendous practices by exposing physicians and therapists who push the boundaries of ethical practice by administering untested medical treatments to children that sterilize them, mutilate their bodies, and use them as guinea pigs. So what can you do? Well, one of the things I want to say that you can do is, there, like it always happens when there's these things, there'll be other competing bills that will come up. Some people wanting to do just a little bit, others wanting to do more. What we can't settle for is anything that allows this to continue. So if a legislator has a bill that says just surgeries, or maybe one that says, oh, we'll just ban puberty blockers, or another might have a bill that says, well, we'll let the ones that are already on puberty blockers and the things that they're doing continue, and we'll only ban future. Why would we allow, like I said, over thousands of children right now to continue this destructive path and not go through puberty? Did you ever think the day would come when you could look around the room, because I'm looking around this room now, and except for maybe, I don't even think there's even children young enough here who haven't at least started in puberty, that probably everybody I see in this room went through puberty. Wouldn't you think so? Because what is puberty? Puberty it is, of course, what changes girls into women and boys into men, but it also has to do with bone density and brain development and even heart development, all kinds of things that we need puberty for. So that's why we need this bill. So Rex, please, this is Representative Rex Ship that will come up here now. He will explain his bill, what goes on and why we need to do this. And then we're asking you to contact your legislators, tell them to support House Bill 132, that's Rex's bill. Contact the governor, ask him to sign the bill. Share this information with your friends. It should be a flyer in your packet that has this information. Sign up to receive our email so you know when this bill comes up. And do all you possibly can to make this bill pass. Okay, so here's
Wow, it works. It works. So can you hear me okay, everybody? Okay. All right. That's better, right? Okay. We can get it to stay that way. There we go. I'm happy to be here, ladies and gentlemen. This has been an issue that I've been working on now for this will be the third year. We've been trying to get this legislation passed. For the life of me, I can't figure out why. Well, I kind of know why I haven't been able to get it into committee and so forth, but I think we've got some good traction this year as I've worked with my colleagues over the interim. But it's mind-boggling to think that here in the state of Utah, where we know that our children are our most valuable asset, why are we allowing this type of a thing to be done? And I think we're going to get some things done this year. So we want to protect our vulnerable children from and confused children. And Gail set the stage there, and a lot of the things that she mentioned will be repeated as well. This is what the bill will do. It define administering puberty-inhibiting drugs or cross-sex hormones or performing mutilating surgeries on minors for purposes of an attempted sex change as unprofessional conduct. So this will be a licensing issue for these medical professionals that do this. It's going to be considered unprofessional conduct. There are exceptions for all known medical conditions or diseases for which many of the drugs or hormones or surgical procedures are part of proper treatment protocols. If there's a medical reason that they need to, we know that there certainly are a lot of women that end up needing mastectomies, but it's not for this reason, for sure. It does not affect the rights of adults to make their own decisions. So this is the bill is designed only for minors. When a person reaches age 18, then they're free to make their own choice. We know scientifically that their brains still aren't fully developed. That doesn't happen until the mid-20s. But they're able to make a lot of decisions at that age, and so that's where we're going to start with this. Gender dysphoria is confused feelings about one's biological sex. It is an illusion, or in really stubborn cases, a delusion. This is a mental health issue. It's a mental health issue, so why are we damaging a perfectly healthy body because of a mental health issue? There's nothing medically wrong with the physical body. Historically, a small fraction of 1% of prepubescent children experience confused feelings about their biological sex. Continuing spike in number of teenagers who believe they are transgender since 2016, and this is especially among girls. Back in the day, this was mostly affecting boys, young boys. But now it's flipped. We have what we call rapid onset dysphoria, and it's primarily young women that are experiencing this. Teenagers are now 90% of cases. Clearly a result of social media influence and social contagions And the activists agree that this is what's causing it. What's real? Emotions or objective physiology? Activists and transgender affirming doctors and mental health therapists agree that gender dysphoria is a mental health issue. But they believe that the illusions or delusions determine reality and define who the child is and control over object physiology. In their view, the body needs to be changed to try to match the confused emotional feelings in the head. They try to treat mental health issues by damaging physically healthy bodies instead of dealing with the emotional and psychological issues. Medical gender transition procedures involve progressively more severe and irreversible lifelong negative consequences. Mutilating surgeries destroy vital body organs and functions. Chemical sterilization from cross-sex hormones distort female and male genitals and enlarge breasts on males are irreversible. Many other serious medical risks are involved. The consent forms list pages of them. I made a visit last year during the session to the gender clinic at the University of Utah and got a copy of their consent form that parents have to sign off on. And it lists pages and pages and pages, and they acknowledge in these consent forms the dangers and the mutilation and the sterilization that takes effect. And so if these, how many of you completely read the consent forms when you go to the doctor? And I think a lot of this, I don't know that they're taking the time to really help parents and kids to understand what's going to probably happen to them. So let's stop pretending. No chemical or medical procedures can give a girl functioning male gonads, genitals, or glands, or change a girl's 46XX chromosomal makeup into a boy's 46XY chromosomal makeup. No procedures can give a boy a functioning uterus, ovaries, or female genital organs or glands, or change a boy's 46XY chromosomal makeup into a girl's 46XX chromosomal makeup. We can mutilate boys or girls or change their outward appearance to a degree through chemicals or surgery, but that only helps them pretend to be something they are not. And so many of them have regrets. I've seen data out there that indicates that the suicidal ideation on the ones that realize and have regrets is 19 times higher than those that have the ideation because they want to transition. So the basic premise of transgenderism procedures is that a girl can be born into a boy's body and that a boy can be born into a girl's body. This notion is pure ideology. Nothing in science or logic supports this idea. So the fundamental question, every member of this, this was a presentation I did to our caucus. So this is what I'm saying to you, and I'm saying this to the legislature as well. Every member must face the fundamental question of what I'm saying to you, and I'm saying, somebody wants to help. Do you really believe deep down that a person can be born into the wrong body? Do you really believe that a girl can be born into a boy's body or that a boy can be born into a girl's body? If you don't truly believe that, it necessarily follows that administering these damaging procedures on the medically healthy bodies of children and adolescents is profoundly wrong. The legislature has a fundamental moral obligation to protect vulnerable kids. It's our most valuable asset from the lifelong damage these procedures cause. And there is the question that Gail brought up also in hers. What about parental rights? There are many laws in the Utah Code are designed to protect minor children and youth from risky or damaging activities and substances, even when the youth and the parents think it's okay or a good idea. Neither the parents nor the doctor nor the therapist have to live with the life-altering consequences of these procedures, but confused children do. We have confused children, and yet we are moving them into something that's going to damage their bodies permanently. So let's wait until they are adults. Confused and vulnerable kids are not in a position to really comprehend the consequences to make a rational and mature judgment for themselves. They need to wait until they become adults and gain sufficient maturity to do so. Simple arithmetic makes this imperative, And it's been shown that by simply waiting, most of these kids, as Gail mentioned, over 85% of all kids, and there's certainly more on the boys' side, are fine in their biological sex by the time they get to adulthood. So why are we trying to pick and choose those that really are trans? So, well, and it says that's just what we were saying right here. 85% are comfortable. There's every reason to expect that even higher share of teenagers who come to believe they are transgender through social media or peer influences will resolve their feelings in favor of their biological sex as they mature and get past teenage confusion. Even if one buys into the transgender ideology, this means that procedures are now being performed on the wrong people in more than 4 out of 5 cases. What about suicide? Minors who feel confused about their biological sex do experience a higher incidence of suicidal ideation. Most parents of these kids consent to transition procedure because they have been scared by affirming therapists into believing that their child is at high risk of committing suicide if they don't let them transition. The question is whether transition procedures actually reduce suicides, and there is no evidence that they do. Gender-confused children and youth need mental health therapy that will help them recognize and resolve the emotional issues underlying the confusion. This is a mental health condition. They need mental counseling and mental health therapy. And a lot of people say, well, can't we just be nice? Supporting the bill means some key people will say that you hate transgender kids or accuse you of bigotry. Subjecting vulnerable and innocent youth to irreversible damage and treating their emotional confusion as reality is more abusive than nice. It is more neglectful than kind, and it is more cruel than loving. If we love these kids, and we do, there's no question about that. I have 7 children and 8 grandchildren. I love kids. They live too far away. I don't get to see them often enough. We love them enough not to make their current confusion worse by enabling it. We love them enough to do the right thing, even when that means opposing current national fads or trends or local special interests. So that's my presentation, ladies and gentlemen. I've been, like I say, I've been working on this for a long time. A lot of people say to me, what is wrong with our legislature? Why are we not passing something to protect our most valuable asset? And I can tell you that you can be really helpful in this process. As a legislator, when I get emails and texts from constituents, I pay attention to them, especially, please don't have somebody make up a form letter and everybody send the same letter. When we see these, I think some of the other legislators here will agree that we don't pay much attention to them. But if it's a well thought out, couple of lines comment, this is really concerning to me, please pass this, or please don't pass this, we listen. So if you'll reach out to your senator in your district and your representative as well, and also reach out directly to the governor and leadership in the House and in the Senate, the Speaker and the President, let them know how you feel about this, that you want your kids and grandkids protected. And they'll listen to you. We need you to help us get this legislation passed to protect our kids. So with that, I don't know if there's any questions out there. I see some hands. So if we can get a mic to them, I'll attempt to answer your questions.
Testing.
So currently, the Department of Professional License in Utah puts a lot of, I'm trying to think of the constrictions on what counselors and mental health professionals can say to even help youth or adults who are struggling with gender dysphoria. So would your bill overcome those limitations that are put on counselors so they can actually give kids the help that they need and give adults the help that they need?
Thank you. That's a very good question.
And I have one more after that.
Okay.
Should I get them both in?
So there is an administrative rule that was put in place around the conversion therapy that kind of restricts mental health therapists what they can do. I believe that there is a legislator that's planning to run another bill to change that so that these kids can get, because that's what they need is mental health therapy. So I think they're in the works. I know there was, during the interim, the Administrative Rules Committee met and had a discussion about this very thing too. So I think you're going to see probably some changes in that.
And then also, even if you see the changes there needs to be some protections to make sure insurance companies can't, I guess, basically make these doctors or professionals where they can't take those insurances if they step out of the boundaries of the insurance. So I think it has to go beyond the licensing, and also make sure insurance companies can't be punitive to these mental health professionals as well. And then my other question is, like, I'm obviously a little overweight, but I checked into getting weight reduction surgery. If I don't lose my weight this year, I don't really want it, but it is complicated. I have to jump through a lot of different hurdles as an adult to do that. And so even for adults, you know, that long list that you were talking about at the University of Utah, those should be have to not just be written, but that should be verbally discussed with even adults that are making that type of decision. And it should be a lengthier process for an adult to make those transitions as well. So even though definitely have to protect kids, but I think there needs to be a lot more to help adults making those decisions as well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Any other question?
So last year,
Over here.
some
okay.
of us were at a little meeting, and we talked to a therapist who said the same thing that you just said. She had moved from another state into Utah, and she said when she was trying to work with youth, she was prohibited, just because of what you said, from, you use better words than I can use, from trying to steer children away from their confusion, or, you know, there were certain words that she was actually afraid of using for being sued. And she said, I'm so upset in the state of Utah, of all states. She says, she gave up her license as a therapist. So you have some therapists who want to do their work, but because of what she was saying is going on, that she felt like she just gave up her job.
Yes, and in my opinion, anybody should be able to talk to about a mental health therapist about anything they want to talk to them about.
Without being sued.
Right. So I agree. Hopefully something gets done on that. So, and I think there's some things in the works to do it. Question.
Representative Shipp, thank you for your persistence on this matter. I'm a retired pediatrician, and a couple things I'm concerned about. Number one, why is the Attorney General's office not pursuing this as child abuse? Number two,
Let me make a response to that real quick.
Go ahead.
One of the things that I've been working really hard to do, this bill had an interim study done a year before last, and it went to the Health and Human Services Committee. I have been trying the whole time to get this in Judiciary Committee because it is child abuse, in my opinion. And so I'm hoping that leadership will put this in the Judiciary Committee the first week of the session that's coming up in 2 weeks. And that's what I'm pushing for. So that's what I hope happens. And you're right, it is child abuse. Okay, go ahead.
That's good news. Number two, is Medicaid paying for these procedures?
Well, because it's in the DSM-5 about these procedures, yes. If you're on Medicaid, it'll pay for it because it's in their Bible, the DSM-5, that they've got that in there. So insurance does pay for it. So,
can that be fixed?
well, if my bill passes, we won't need to worry about that, will
Okay.
we? Because it bans it all, so.
Okay.
Okay,
great.
thank you.
Thank you.
Looks like we have another question back here. A couple of more. Gail, I don't know, you can shut me off whenever you need to, okay? Okay.
Yeah, what is the rationale given by these other legislators when they say, hey, I'm not on board with this bill? I did read a little bit about Spencer Cox saying he didn't like some of the language, which is completely silly, but I don't get what the no answer is made of.
Well, I really truly believe that I've had the votes that if my colleagues, if they were able to hear this in a committee and get to the floor, I believe it would pass. What's happened is leadership has held it up from getting a committee hearing. And so I think we've finally got that broke down. And I did have a good meeting actually with the governor and lieutenant governor in October and discussed this, and had many meetings with our House leadership on it. And that's why I think truly we do have some traction, and it'll get heard in committee and to the floor. And hopefully we can get it all passed out with a supermajority, so you don't have to worry if the governor decides he doesn't like it. So.
I had one question, is that I know that some teenagers and children obtain the puberty blockers illegally. When this bill passes, how will we protect that from not happening as much? Or is there a way, I guess?
Well, it's illegal. It would be illegal. So I don't know what else we could do from that perspective. You know, other than if people know something's happening illegally, they need to be turned in some way so that they can be, you know, have to pay the price there. So anyway, that's not much of an answer, but I don't know what else you do. It's already illegal, yeah. Another one back here.
I'm just curious to know what forces, I mean, obviously there's strategies that are being implemented to fight this that have been successful. Can you share with us, what are they doing? And what do we need to do different to be successful this time? Obviously you have made some progress so far with some leadership. And what can we do? So number one, what are the forces that you see that we're up against that are being more successful than we are? Number two, what are we doing to change our strategy to outmaneuver them? And third, what can we do? Do you need us at committee meetings? Can you give us, other than just writing letters, can you give us some more actionable things that we could do to help in that, maybe a shift in strategy?
Well, thank you for that. Well, we're, excuse me, getting over a cold. The strategies, I believe, are working. The people that are against this are trying to say that we hate children and that our kids, that if we pass this, we're going to cause a lot of suicide with the youth because they need this. This is affirming care. If we don't do this, it's going to damage them, and I've been called a hater of children many, many times. And so there are some in the body that have talked about parental rights, that if a parent feels like that's the best care for their child, why should the legislature get in the way of that? They're getting between the doctor and the parent and the child. Well, my response to that has always been, we already do that. They can't smoke or drink until a certain age. They can't even get a tattoo till they're older. They can't drive till they're older. So, but I'm telling you, the main thing that has happened on this, and that's why it's so important that you get the word out and you let people know how you feel about it, your legislators and the governor and so on, is because leadership has held this up. There's been push from that perspective, and the way we get around that is, let me tell you, when the citizenry gets upset about something, and they contact the lady, and we're getting all kinds of texts and emails about something, we listen. And that's your responsibility to make sure your legislator is listening and let your friends and neighbors and family know to help get this done. And I think that's the strategy we need to use. I think this is getting enough attention now nationally. I mean, all of you have seen time and time again on the news reports, especially Tucker Carlson, and some of these people have been showing some of these kids that have regrets and talking about it, Glenn Beck and so on. It's getting a lot of national attention, and I think it's in people's minds a lot more. When I first started working on that, people were astounded that, what is this? Is that really happening? Well, people know now, and so we need to respond. If we want to protect our children, we better get on the phone and get on the text and get on the emails and help make it happen. Okay, does that help? Okay.
Sir, yeah,
yes.
right here. You know, we talked about this child abuse thing, and the legalese end of this thing is this. I just don't see where it is feasible. In order to get that through, you'd have to have also an actor or somebody involved, and it's always, you know, kind of the devil made me do it kind of thing. You know, where they're saying, well, blame it on my friend, blame it on my parents, and, you know, I can see where we could, in order to have child abuse, you have to have another party or actor involved in this, and I think it would just tie up the legal system, and you'd have to have a whole another situation because, you know, you'd have to have somebody representing that child abuse some way legally. And I think we need to think about that as far as, you see what I'm trying to say?
Sure.
That you just, you know, she could say, oh, my friend, my parents, something like that, and there's always, it's passing the buck kind of thing. So.
Yeah. Well, and also, people, keep an eye on HB 132. You can go to le.utah.gov, and you can look up any bill. All you do is go to that website, le.utah.gov, and in the search bar put HB 132, and it'll come up, the bill will come up, and you'll be able to see when that's going to go to a committee. And if you'll keep an eye on it, when there's a committee hearing, you can weigh in. You can come to the Capitol and testify as public testimony for or against any bill that there is. And you can get online now too. You can actually listen in and actually testify virtually now as well on these meetings. And so the more attention this is getting and people are pushing in favor of it is going to have an effect on those that have the opportunity to vote on this and to vote for it. Go ahead, ma'am.
So because the argument that is used against this is the risk of suicide, increased risk of suicide for young people, I'm very excited to hear that there is something in the works to empower counselors to be able to truly help young people. But is there somebody specifically who's putting forward a bill? I feel like we need to be supporting that cause in tandem with what you're doing in order to counter the arguments that are being used.
Yeah, I'm not at liberty to say right now because that's up to that particular person and they're ready to make it public and so forth. But I just know that there's something in the works on that right now, and I'm sure you'll have the opportunity to hear when it is in the works.
Would you tell them we're cheering them on?
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, we probably have time for one or two more questions if they're short and sweet.
So you talked about social media and influences from their friends, but nobody's talking about the alarming number of educators who are being busted as activists rather than educators. What can we do about that? Because our kids are falling behind where it matters, and they're becoming activists by those who are being trained to be activists in the universities.
Talk to your school boards, okay, about what's going on in the schools if that's happening. But yes, it's there are people out there that are pushing the envelope on this to our kids, and
but the teachers are being trained in the universities too. So is there something that can be done about that?
Well, I know there's some discussion going on that too. I'm actually serve on the Higher Education Appropriation Subcommittee. And I know I've talked to the Commissioner of Higher Ed about these concerns, yes. So. Okay, I think my time's up. Thank you for allowing me to speak to you today. Please do all you can to do your part to help get this passed so we can protect our most valuable asset, it's our children. Thank you.
Okay. What'd you do to this? Yeah. Got it. So we can do this with your help. You know, it's all, there were some questions about the law. Well, the law right now doesn't say anything about this other than there is a law saying you can't sterilize children. We have to make sure that the law does say they can't do any of these procedures. And we cannot put anything in the law that would in any way make it look like the state of Utah supports this and even wants to find ways to make it easier. And we have people that are doing that. And we even have a resolution I noticed for this year that had to do with wanting to, pass this resolution to say that insurance companies, and I assume, I haven't read I just read the title, I haven't read the bill, probably talking about Utah, the insurance for the public workers in Utah has to pay for gender transition surgeries and procedures. So lots of things coming down on us that we have to watch and make sure that doesn't happen. Now, I should have introduced Raina before. The question keeps coming up about children and what they go through and how they're led to do these things. And so Raina is going to share with you her experience as a child and dealing with this issue. Raina is our secretary for Eagle Farm, and I'm very grateful that she's willing to share this very painful experience in her life. And when this bill comes before committee, we plan to bring in some of these young people who've gone through these procedures and then changed their mind. We've already got commitments from one of them. We'll get some more. We'll bring in doctors and psychiatrists and psychologists. And we're going to have to spend a lot of money to do that, but we're going to do that. We're going to bring in the experts that will answer a lot of the questions you were asking about today and let the legislators know that this procedure has to stop. So, Raina, this is Raina Williams.
And hopefully those people won't cry when they're testifying, because I will probably cry today, and I apologize. I was talking to David yesterday, and when he found out my subject, he said, "Wow, you're brave." I said, "No, I'm scared spitless." Unfortunately, it doesn't work for the eyes. I still have plenty of fluid coming out of the eyes. So, oh, my computer doesn't like whatever I did. Okay. One of the things that we hear as conservatives is that we don't tell enough stories. We like facts, we like figures, but we're missing the human element. So I'm here to tell you guys a story. And it's not fictional, it's very real. So once upon a time, a long, long time ago, in the early 1970s, okay? One day in March, there was a young couple in the LDS hospital. They were there having their first baby. The couple were my parents, and after I was born, see, I know just enough about technology to make messes. No, it's supposed to be black. Yeah, we're good. So after I was born, the doctor looked up He smiled and he said, "Congratulations, it's a girl." I am so thankful that I was born then and not 30 years later. If I'd been born later, my story would be very, very different. So if you were to plot my life right now, those of you who do family history, you know all about timelines and stuff, right? This is what my life, my timeline would kind of look like. I was born at LDS Hospital. I lived across from Sugar House Park for the first few years of my life. I had a brother born and a sister born and another brother born, and my parents moved us all to West Jordan. So I grew up right around this area. This is kind of my hometown, right? I went to elementary school, I went to middle school, went to high school. During that time, my parents kept having kids, like a lot of us do, right? More siblings would join the family. I graduated. I went to college in Grand Junction, Colorado. I majored in music because music was everything to me at that point. I got married. I had a baby. I moved back to Utah, had more babies, got divorced, married Mr. Right, had even more babies, and here we are today. But that doesn't tell you the whole story. So what didn't make the highlight reel of the timeline? Well, I was the general manager of 2 fabric stores that are no longer here. I worked at the airport as a cargo ramp agent because I was buff and tough and I can do this. I have an incredible love story with my sweet husband. I homeschooled all the kids. And I struggled with severe gender dysphoria. When I was 6 and 7 years old, I was hurt very badly by an older teenager in the neighborhood. It was not a one-time occurrence, and though I didn't talk about it at the time, it would end up affecting my life in very adverse ways until I did talk about it and learned how to come to terms with what had happened. Fast forward to my difficult preteen and teenage years. I was a pretty typical teen. I was ornery. I was obstinate. I wanted to get away with as much as I possibly could, my poor parents. But I also hated being a girl. I would cry myself to sleep at night, many, many nights, because I hated my body. I would pray that something would happen and somehow I would wake up to be a boy. I did not want to be a boy. And that never happened. I wondered why God was punishing me. Why did he make me a girl? So eventually I developed some pretty severe eating disorders and ended up in the hospital for anorexia and bulimia. One of the things I had to do was meet with a counselor, and thank goodness. I remember one session very, very clearly because I went on and on crying and lamenting the fact that I was a girl. I did not want to be a girl. Why did I have to be a girl? Why wasn't there something, anything that could be done to make me into a boy? It just wasn't fair. I did not want to be a girl. My dear counselor let me carry on, and then said something that helped me change my life. She looked at me and she said, "Yes, dear, but you are one. So let's come up with ways that you can learn to accept that." Yes, I was a girl then, I'm a girl now, but if it had been 30 years earlier, would I be now? I mean, I would have medically transitioned. There's a difference. So I learned, girls do not have to like pink. I still do not like pink. Girls do not have to wear lace. They don't have to wear ruffles. I still do not wear ruffles. Girls don't have to enjoy reading, but I do enjoy reading. Girls can be good at math, and I helped start a math club in my high school. Girls can be in jazz band, and I was. Girls can be fast in track, and I was. Girls can be good at basketball, even at 5'3". She helped me learn little by little how to like who I was. She told me I didn't have to wear high heels if I didn't want to. I'm in flats. She helped me set goals to become better and better. As I began to heal, I learned that the trauma I faced as a young child had damaged me. Not physically anymore, that had healed, but emotionally. I was lashing out at what I thought was the root of the problem. If I was a girl, I would not be able to protect myself from harm. One of the hardest lessons I had to learn was that I could trust in others if the danger was too great for me to handle on my own. But I could be strong and fight hard too, hence the reason I was a Carlo Ramp agent. It was a long time before I learned that being a girl is really pretty great. It was many, many small incremental steps, most of them forward, some of them backwards, and then forward again. However, what would have happened if I had been born 30 years later? Would my counselor have been able to say, yes, dear, but you are one? Or would she have said, oh, you're right. You must have been assigned the wrong sex at birth. Obviously, you're a boy in the wrong body. Let's put a pause on this puberty problem and give you puberty blockers. And then let's give you testosterone. And then in a little bit, we can help you medically transition. Would that have given me a happily ever after? I can tell you no, it would not have. Representative Shipp is my hero. He's willing to take a hard stance. He needs our help. He wants to protect children who are vulnerable, like I was. Believe me, if there was a different way back then, I would have jumped at it. And I would have regretted it. Please contact your legislators and help him pass this bill. Thankfully, I was born when I was. I had a counselor who listened to my frustrations and then had the freedom to give me the tools I needed, who could affirm with true gender-affirming care, yes, dear, but you are one. She helped teach me how to come to terms with who I was and the woman I would become. I did not become a medical experiment by being prescribed body-altering drugs that would have made me sterile. Instead, I was able to come to terms with God. And I learned that being a woman is actually pretty great because I did not do irreversible damage to my body. I get to enjoy life with an amazing husband. We have 12 incredible children, 19 fun, energetic, very energetic grandchildren. And after all of that, I learned that being a wife, having a family, being a woman is pretty awesome, and this is my happily ever after. Thank you.
We'll continue with making changes. Sorry. We're going to move now to Al Jackson. We're in one of these situations right now that as the speakers show up, that's when they're going to speak. So it's going to be an interesting day, but we should be hopefully by lunchtime, we're all caught up and back on schedule. So the next speaker is my good friend, Al Jackson. Many of you remember that he used to be a state senator here. making it worse. Do something about him, Jill. We do. We want him back. He's talked about, possibly changing places with Burgess because everybody's confusing him for Burgess. So that when Burgess decides not to run again, he can just move in and nobody will know there's been a change.
Good. That was awesome. Thank you, Gail. That was really sweet. Thank you. Okay, let me get this back to normal people height. It's really cool being here with you all. Jolene and I, oh, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that very much. Thank you. Okay, awesome. Awesome, great, thank you. Okay, great, yeah. So Jolene and I are thrilled to be here with you all today. It's where we live now in Washington, D.C., it's very difficult to find people who love God, family, and country. We have to look under rocks. Sometimes we can't even find them at church. But when we're out here and we're amongst you all, we feel like we're at home because you all are our people. So thank you for being awesome and for being wonderful. I actually asked Jolene earlier, what's it like being married to Burgess Owens? Because everywhere we go, people confuse me with Burgess Owens. Jolene's her first reaction to me, the guy that fought in the Civil War. I mean, Burgess is like 10, 15, 20 years older than I am. But I'm actually grateful to be associated and affiliated with him. However, in an airport recently, I got chased down by a mob wanting to know why I voted present on the Respect for Marriage Act. They had me confused with Burgess Owens. But anyway, I am grateful to know him and love being around individuals like yourselves who believe in God, family, and country. So one of the cool things about living on the East Coast is all the historical sites that Jolene and I and our family go to. We like the beach, we like Hawaii, but where we really prosper and grow and develop and love is when we go to these historical sites up and down the East Coast from Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, New York, Boston. We spent Thanksgiving in Plymouth this year. We went to Boston. We went through the Freedom Trail. It's really incredible. And over Christmas, Jolene and I had the opportunity to go to Colonial Williamsburg, which is one of our most favorite places on the planet. And they have these characters that depict, they're called nation builders. There's a George Washington, a young George Washington, an older George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Martha Washington, Lafayette, James Madison, and et cetera. And we had the opportunity to listen to the old George Washington. This is right after he became president. And he did a marvelous job talking about the George Washington's farewell address. In fact, he gave us a lot out of that address. And he mentioned Providence several times, which was really cool because a lot of these historical sites have become more and more secular. So whenever they bring up God, our hearts just soar. And there's an older gentleman in the group because after George speaks, then he opens it up to questions. And there was an older guy there sitting quite near us who thought he was going to be cute. And he said that all men are created, phrase that's in the Declaration of Independence, they wrote that, but why didn't you all believe in that? In other words, why didn't you create a government for everyone? And so I looked at him, through my eyes, I just wanted to shoot laser beams at him because he was trying to be cute. He was really referring to, well, why did you write a document that excluded minorities and women? And it was a classic attempt, as they always do, to try to be divisive and to take advantage of an ignorant, uninformed citizenry. But George Washington, to his credit, he paused a little bit and he was going to give in to this question, but then he said, no, we do believe that all men are created equal. And he got an applause from the audience. And what he went on to say was, Now, how we treat each other, however, is a different matter, and we will be held accountable for how we treat each other. But make no mistake about it, we believe and still do that all men are created equal. It was an incredible rebuttal. So if the man had just pulled back the onion just a little bit, just done a little bit of research, he would have found out and believed for himself that those founding documents from our founding fathers and our founding mothers laid the foundation through Christian men and women to abolish the institution of slavery. They all knew during the Constitutional Convention that slavery was wrong and that it had to go. However, they were focused on building a nation if they could keep slavery contained in the South and stop the importation of slaves, which is highlighted in Article 1, Section 9, that slavery would eventually die out. They further solidified this notion in 1787 when the Continental Congress passed the Northwest Ordinance, referring to the new territories in the Ohio Valley that were soon to become states. No slavery in those areas. In fact, they went a little further. They wanted religion, morality, and knowledge taught in the schools. But no, this man wanted to sow the seeds of division, just like what's going on across the board today. His objective was to take advantage of an ignorant citizenry, ignorant of the real facts, and thereby playing on our emotions. And how often do we see that happening today? So I went up to the man afterwards and I said, I thought what Washington said to you was brilliant. I thought it was great. And for me to go to him and say that really put him on the defensive. He didn't know what to say, because I believe that those documents were written for all of mankind. So critical race theory is a perfect example of a tool that the adversary uses to divide us. Instead of our identity being in Christ or as image bearers of loving heavenly parents, he wants us to define ourselves by our race, our gender, or our sexual identity. I went and got a haircut yesterday, as you all can tell. And my barber, he knows, he and I become really good friends, and he knows that I speak on these issues. And he's a proponent of critical race theory, and I asked him why, and he said, well, why don't you all want America's true history taught in the schools? I said, nobody's arguing against that. No one is opposed to that notion. In fact, we want more history taught in the schools. Particularly, we want stories of faith, resilience, and perseverance taught in the schools. Instead, this curriculum directs the audience to see the world as defined by two categories of an oppressed and an oppressor. And that's what the adversary wants. If he can do that, he can even get believers of God to believe that the notion that the Savior's mission was only to redeem the marginalized and the oppressed, which divides us in our churches. The Savior, however, came to redeem all of mankind. And that notion is what brings us together in unity and love. That's why the adversary wants to divide us. So the intent of this divisive curriculum is to promote a false narrative of what they want you to think, that you're a victim, that you're oppressed, that you can't make it unless those that oppressed you are now part of your uplift. So what this man was saying to me in Williamsburg, and he didn't say this literally, was that, Al, those documents, the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution, were not written for you. They didn't have you in mind when they penned those words. And I feel like nothing could be further from the truth, because I've done my own research, and I know that for a fact. Critical race theory and everything associated with any divisive curriculum is an attack on freedom. It's an attack on our agency. It's an attack on our reliance of God to help us to reach our divine potential. Satan wants us instead to depend on an all-powerful, centralized government to save us. He wants us to focus on political power instead of Jesus Christ, the liberator of us all. So how do we overcome this? First, we must recognize that we don't have a political problem in this country. We have a spiritual problem. It's the gospel of Jesus Christ that will save us. It's the principles upon which this nation was founded that are rooted in Judeo-Christian values that will save us. If God is the solution in our spiritual lives, why wouldn't he want to be involved in the work that we're trying to do to protect our families and our children? I would say to you, Representative Shipp, I'm so grateful at what you're doing. And there was a question earlier about what can we do differently? I would admonish you all to pick out a room in the Capitol and approach that room and fasting and prayer and dedicate a meeting to God and asking him to help us get this legislation passed. If it worked for George Washington, why wouldn't it work for us? As we approach these issues, we have to ask ourselves two questions. First, what can we do today or in the very near future to protect the family? But we can't stop there. We can't just be focused on issues. We have to ask the second question. What can we do to protect the family on a permanent basis? I don't know about you all, but I'm getting worn out chasing issue after issue after issue. It seems like we fight one battle, we win, and then the adversary creates 1, 2, 3, 4 more problems, and then we run to those problems, and we're playing whack-a-mole. We need to do something that make our victories lasting and permanent. To protect the family on a more permanent basis, we must restore the foundational principles given to us in the original Constitution. The doctrine of separation of powers and checks and balances, which Mike Lee spoke beautifully about, must be restored. Because of amendments that have been added to the Constitution, coupled with poor Supreme Court decisions, power has gone from we to people to Washington, D.C., and even to the state capitol. The U.S. Constitution was designed to protect the family by dividing power among many, coupled with the necessary checks and balances to counter the inevitable bad behavior that all men exhibit. The founders told us not to trust government. Jefferson said, "Let no more be said of confidence in men, but bind him down from mischief with the chains of the Constitution." Those chains were designed to prevent centralized decision-making. Centralized decision-making empowers the few to reign over the many. Centralized decision-making takes power from the parents to direct their children's education, from picking the school principals, from directing that principal to hire teachers that you all want, to direct what books can be in the libraries and which curriculum that your kids are exposed to. The school was an extension of the family. Once you got the parents out of the way, centralized decision-making then forced God out of the schools. It's those 28 principles that we read in Dr. Skousen's book, The 5,000-Year Leap, that should be our guide. Some of those principles are the proper role of government is to protect equal rights, not provide equal things. The most promising method of securing a virtuous and morally stable people is to elect virtuous leaders. The core unit which determines the strength of any society is the family. Therefore, the government should foster and protect its integrity. Strong local government is the keystone to preserving human freedom. Those are not conservative versus liberal principles. Those principles are universal. Those principles are eternal. They transcend both race and political party. And I saw this firsthand about 1.5 years ago. I was on a Zoom with a few millennials. They had a company they had formed, and they wanted to get my Washington, D.C. perspective on their business because they wanted to help their clients navigate COVID and the things that were going on in the economy. And we had a really good discussion. All of them had different pronouns next to their names. They were all different genders, different colors, and they were all young, just beautiful people. He, they, she, fee, fi, fo, fum. I mean, they all had all of them. My pronoun had next to it, "I'm plenty of man, baby." So they asked me, they said, "Well, what do you think is a solution to the problems that we face?" And then I asked them the question, I said, because young people have a phenomenal sense of justice because they have been taught to look for oppression as opposed to opportunity. They want to even things out and be fair to everyone. And I said, wouldn't it be cool if you had the authority and the decision-making ability to make decisions for your local communities and not have someone in Washington, D.C. make those determinations for you and your local community? Every one of them agreed with that notion. They agreed with the notion that strong local self-government is the keystone to preserving human freedom. Brothers and sisters, we will not prevail on the track that's been created by the other side. We must, as J. Reuben Clark admonished, to quietly build a second track, a track that's built on God and his covenant people. If you persist on trying to win on their track, the train will eventually run you over. But if you focus on the big picture, which involves God and his way, you will not fail. And you will produce, and what you produce will have long-term implications, the permanency that we desire. God must go back into the schools. And the way to do that is to put the parents back in charge. With the parents back in charge, religion and morality, which the founders originally intended, will go back into the schools. There's a quote from Dr. Skousen. He mentioned this in a talk he gave. He said, J. Reuben Clark never lost confidence in having a generation finally become alert and finally doing its homework and getting into a position where they would do what God and the founding fathers intended that we should have been doing all the time. The key phrase in there is do your homework, which begins at home. Please, please, please make quality family time a high priority. As you dedicate time to teaching your children and your grandchildren these principles of liberty, your entire family will become a force for good. When things get bad, and they will, according to the word, the staff upon which the nation will lean will be upon those families that know. This nation has been injured from east to west. It's you, the people of Utah, who are well positioned to heal this nation in a movement that goes from west to east. Armed with the Almighty God, help from God, the same God that parted the Red Sea. We need his help in healing this land. We need to be on his side. We need to have him involved in everything that we do. Every legislation that we support, every legislation that we create has to have God involved in it and those 28 principles that went into those founding documents. Armed with principles of liberty written upon our hearts, that will be the weapon that we will use to heal this land. Strong families, with the help of God, will save this nation. God bless each of you. God bless your families, and God bless this nation. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Now Tim Ballard gets to go after me.
I'll tell you what. At least you can do is put it back, right? So now this is not a concert, so a standing ovation does not mean he's going to give you another number. He's done. So everybody loves Al. And Julene. Next time, Julene, will have you speak. Well, our speakers are arriving. Tim Ballard has been here, and he will be next. And I think you all know how we feel about Tim Ballard. We just had this amazing opportunity to, here in Utah, to be the one to premiere his movie. It was a great movie, and we were so grateful. And I want to thank you, Tim, for giving us the opportunity to be able to be the ones to do that, because we were the ones that were, and we just appreciate you so much. And you can read all about him in our program. And you can read, and then go online and read about him.
Love you. Thank you, Gail. Love you. Well, thank you so much. It's so great to always come here, to be amongst friends and be able to just, I get a lot of opportunity to speak, but not just openly and say everything that I really want to say. And I'm going to share a story with you today. Who was at the Sound of Freedom screening? Okay, so I kind of teased something afterwards, and I didn't have a lot of time because they were kicking us out, and I want to finish what I kind of started telling you after the screening. Our operation has grown quite a bit. I mean, you guys were the supporters in the beginning. Today we have about 150 employees, I think about 80 contractors. We're in 5 regions around the world doing operations and aftercare, supporting law enforcement, and putting up numbers like we never have, and doing more rescues than ever before. And really, I thank you. You're the ones that make it happen. You're the light that we take into the darkness. And so it's to you that I want to tell this story. It's one of the most significant, probably the most significant rescue operation I've ever been a part of, just happened this year. And it was God-directed, and it was revealing, more than just rescuing a bunch of kids, hundreds, probably thousands in the end. It was an operation that proved to me why we exist, why a private organization would function and need to function within the many governments who we support, who cannot move how we need them to move to rescue children. If you know my origin story, I spent 12 years in the government as an undercover operator, special agent with Homeland Security, fighting child crimes and trafficking, and just couldn't move fast enough because of all sorts of things, jurisdictional limitations and bureaucracy, and it just got so frustrating that we thought we'd try it privately. And there's no other way we could have pulled off this operation, which we're calling the Hidden War. There's no way we could have otherwise blown through 6 countries, 3 continents, 6 governments, and rescued hundreds of children, all in the small window of 4 months. So this operation lasted from, it began in Ukraine. We went to Ukraine, and I don't care about the politics, and that's has nothing to do with this. These are children, orphans, who were in bomb zones, target zones, and we went in to just get them out. We went in an extraction effort. And that's where I thought it was going to end. It was interesting because I think I told you this after the screening. Really, I credit my wife with this whole thing. When Russia invaded Ukraine, I believe it was February 24th, 25th, she said, "You got to go to Ukraine." And I thought she meant, figuratively, or of course in prayer, and she's like, no, you need to go. You need to put your boots on the ground. I said, hey, we have a Europe office now. Like, I don't have to be everywhere. And she just, through her tears and biting her lip because she didn't want to say it, but she knew she had to because she felt it. You need to go yourself. And what she was mostly worried about was 12 kids, I think there's 12, that that OUR was working to get out of the country through adoption. There's some countries that are high trafficking areas, and we have a project called Children Need Families, where we find families and provide grants, because there's some countries, and Ukraine happens to be one, where if you're an orphan, the chances of you being trafficked or exploited are so high that we just only know that we got to get you out and find a family for you. And so we knew that when the war began, when Russia invaded, all those adoptions got shut down, and she wanted me to go find these kids. And I explained to her that I wouldn't be able to, and everything shut down. And she said, well, there's some other reason, and you have to go. 4 months later, well, before I get to that, I didn't want to go. I was, scared to go. Bombs were dropping. And I didn't know how effective we could be. But God works with the law of witnesses, right? And within a very unusual, bizarre witness appeared within an hour or two of my wife insisting I go to Ukraine. And that was, I got a phone call from Mel Gibson, like, you know, the actor Mel Gibson. And that's not a usual thing for me to get a call from Mel Gibson. And he said, I mean, he actually did the final edit of The Sound of Freedom. That's how we know each other, but not well enough that I'd be getting phone calls. And he told me that he was in Budapest at the time, and this was right hours after the invasion, and he said he supports a bunch of orphans in Ukraine, and he was worried about them, and he asked if I could help get them out. So now I've got 12 from my wife, I got about 13 others from Mel Gibson, and I'm thinking, okay, I got this list of kids I gotta get out. I told Mel, I said, you gotta help me, this is gonna be expensive. I won't ask you for direct donation, but can you help me? Let's film this, you know, let's film what's happening so we can get people to understand and they can support us. He said, no problem. He helped us get set up and started filming. 4 months later, what I thought was gonna be maybe a documentary about Ukraine ends up being a 4-part docuseries that's almost done. It's being produced by DNA Films and executive produced by Tony Robbins. And it's, I think maybe episode 1 of the 4 episodes, maybe the first 15 minutes is about Ukraine. That's how crazy it got and how prophetic my wife was, that something else was gonna be discovered and something else was gonna happen. This docuseries called The Hidden War comes out sometime this year, probably this summer, I'm guessing. And before I tell you the story, they just launched, DNA Films just released the trailer. So I'd like you to be one of the first to actually see the trailer so you have a visual as I then give you some of the details and reveal to you something stunning that hits at the heart of everything that the Eagle Forum is about. And so here is the trailer to The Hidden War. This is not a war where people are living by the Geneva Conventions. It's a war of terror. Intentionally targeting civilian populations.
We got reports overnight that 3 rockets hit near Kyiv.
Kyiv, the capital of Ukraine, as it comes under renewed fire.
For example, the Ukrainians will blow out a bridge, and so the Russians can't get into Kyiv. They can't take the capital. And so out of frustration, they will turn their tanks on innocent civilians, blow up residential centers, blow up apartment buildings.
People bound and executed on the sides of roads. There were kids that were found in cellars that looked like tortured, some missing ears.
It's the only way they can actually occupy here is to terrorize people to leave.
We cannot stand by and do nothing. Already there's thousands upon thousands of displaced women and children, and they're destitute. They don't have means to travel or take care of themselves, and so they're gonna take opportunities, and the traffickers know that, so the traffickers will provide that opportunity.
Human traffickers are at the borders, taking advantage of the Ukrainian refugee crisis.
We try to discuss, especially women and young girls, to have some preventive measures.
Dangerous propositions.
Annual global profit from human trafficking is around $32 billion.
Luring women into slavery and prostitution and taking children to sell on.
So then we started kind of putting together a team. Aerial Recovery led the effort. Their group is made up of former special ops, so they know exactly how to work in hot zones.
In the first 2 weeks, there was already hundreds of children reported missing from crossing the border.
And we started running operations to go into the bombed out zones. Very dangerous, sometimes bombs are going off.
There were mines that we just passed on the side of the road.
There are Russian checkpoints that'll just kill you for being American.
At the same time, this Dutch policeman knows our work, and especially in Latin America and in Mexico, and said, hey, you guys, we just got the craziest lead. A Dutch pedophile who has been charged and is about to stand trial for raping little boys, he took off and he fugitated to Mexico. and he's looking to traffic Ukrainian war victims in through Mexico into his pedophile market. He's famous because he's a political activist trying to make legal sex with children as young as 2 or 3 years old.
Even if you somehow lured a kid in such a thing, a child can't understand what's happening. A child can't say yes to such a thing.
OUR was able to make contact with this suspected child predator.
My undercover persona is introduced to him as a guy who traffics kids out of Ukraine. We have Ukrainian undercover operators for the first time.
And I was supposed to be believable that I'm young, naive.
With makeup, I can make her look like she's 12, and she'll be the bait. We now have a list of his lieutenants, and we don't know where they are, but we think he certainly knows where they are.
And we're focusing in on that location where this group has created a sex hotel.
They produce child rape videos of little boys.
The next 6 hours are critical because this is when all the pieces need to come into play.
This is trafficking, not prostitution. That these are victims, not volunteers. This is not something out of a Hollywood movie.
There is a movement right now to desensitize the world to the sexualization of children. Thank you. So now that you have a little visual and some context, we're in Ukraine and we are running these convoys, okay, getting intel. When I showed up in Ukraine with a list of, I think, 20 names, the Ukrainians countered me and gave me over 10,000 names of orphans that they didn't know where they were because of the chaos caused by war. And more importantly, and more frightening to me, was the fact that I know that human trafficking is a $32 billion a year business. It's the fastest growing criminal enterprise in the world, and I also know how kids get forced into that market. And it's through vulnerable situations like in the aftermath of a hurricane, mostly in a developed country, or an earthquake, or in this case, a war. And so the traffickers call it harvest time. And that was the intel we were getting. And so we weren't just there to extract those kids, but look for leads. And we found several leads. The one that we're reporting on, because we're working on several, it's like a spider web, was this, and it really was a miracle what happened. You know, it's one of these things that, you know, faith precedes the miracle. And I take a lot of comfort in the fact that there's only one time in the scripture where Jesus gets mafioso. It's righteous because it's Jesus doing it, but if you listen to his words, it's mafioso. I think you know what scripture I'm talking about. He says that it would be better for you to have a millstone cast about your neck and you thrown to the bottom of the sea than that you would hurt one of these little ones, my children. That's mafioso action, right? I mean, that's sinking someone to the bottom of the ocean. And Jesus said it. So I know where he stands on it, so I can expect, and we can expect, miracles when we're fighting to protect children. And by the end of this presentation, you're going to see that Gail and I and all of you were actually in the same exact fight, like down to the actual fight. I never dreamed there'd be a day when this world that I've been fighting for 20 years, doing child crimes cases and human trafficking cases, these guys have always been peripheral monsters, but peripheral rogues, renegades hiding out. Not anymore. Not anymore. Something's happened. The culture has changed. Evil has gripped our nation. And these guys are now confident they can come out. And I'll get to that in a second. It was the most important thing I discovered during this operation. So, but we want to go find these Ukrainian war victims who are missing. The 10,000 orphans is one thing, and then we get another list or another stat of over 200,000 missing women and children that the Ukrainian government believed had likely been trafficked. just so easy. Little children crying over the dead bodies of their parents. And a van comes up and says, hey, we'll take you. And this is what's frustrating to me. We get so lost in some of these politics. It's like I'm on social media, and people I love, people I follow, all they can care about is blah, 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 the whatever money. And it's just like, that's fine, make the argument, I don't care, you're probably right. But you don't even say a word about the fact that there's thousands of little children crying over the dead bodies of the Ukrainian parents, and they're being trafficked by Westerners. Why doesn't that make it into the news? I never understand. As loud as we scream, it doesn't make it. So we decide that we're going to put together a training. I have no Ukrainian operators. I need Ukrainian operators, Ukrainian speakers. And so we put together this training, but we don't have any leads quite yet that we can actually do anything about. And I went, my executive board, I was talking to them, and they said, look, gas prices in Europe are through the roof. This training is going to be so expensive, it's going to be more money than like a big operation. And I said, faith precedes the miracle. We will get the intel, I promise. But you have to support me to do this operation. I got to fly Ukrainians in, I got to do assessments, I got to build a team. And so now we're in about March of this year, and that's when another miracle walks in, this female you see. She walks in, I thought she was looking for her mom, and she was in the wrong place. She had been recruited by another organization who we work with called Free a Girl in Europe. And turns out she's 35 years old, she's an actress, she's brilliant, and she can look 12 or she can look 25 or 30, whatever. And she was the top of the class. So the second day of the training is when I get this lead from a Dutch police asset, a friend of mine, who reveals to me about this guy, Nelson Matsman, the leader of a political party that was formed in 2016 and reformed in 2020. And these guys, their goal is to legalize sex with children. And they have a whole platform, they have literature, and I'm gonna get into in a second. They're a sister organization to one here in the United States that's loosely affiliated with all sorts of pedophile groups called NAMBLA, the North American Man-Boy Love Association. And so this guy, even by Dutch standards, which is pretty tough to get arrested in Holland for anything, right? And he's arrested along with 3 of his lieutenants. Okay, these guys, the party leaders. And of course they call their party something like, it's the party of freedom and neighborly love. Because that's what pedophilia is, apparently. So even the Dutch arrest them, but the Dutch don't do what they should. They give their passports back, let them wait their trial in freedom, and they take off. And no one knows where they are. But they're discovered. And they're discovered just before we start this training in Budapest. And they're discovered because they poke their heads out. This Matman guy, at least, pokes his head out online because he's looking to traffic Ukrainian kids. He's in the sex market in Mexico. He's been there for 2 years, and that's how he gets revealed. So this Dutch cop calls me and he says, hey, I don't think my government's gonna do anything about this. And they weren't going to, by the way. In fact, side note, and we can talk about this later, we're working with the EU, which I can't believe I'm actually doing that, but, and the UN, because they're actually upset, they're doing something right on this one. When the Dutch found out that this guy was hiding in Mexico, the prosecutor erased the international lookout because he said the Mexicans might lynch this charged pedophile child rapist. And let's not let that happen. Instead, let's let thousands of Mexican children be exposed to this guy. So for 4 months, they actually knew and told nobody. Later on, I took a trip with the Attorney General's assistant, the Lieutenant Attorney General of Mexico, to Holland, and we did a whole press conference, and she busted them out pretty hard. But in the meantime, this Dutch policeman did the right thing and basically leaked it to me and said, I know you guys will do something with this. So off we went with our team from Eastern Europe into Mexico. We set this whole operation up. I don't have time to get into all the details about how we do things, about how we lure these people out, but we got him out, and we got him to give us information about where the next guys were. Because we got him, he's the leader, but where are his lieutenants? And his lieutenants, a guy named Martin and a guy named Leslie, the next two guys we were looking for. And how we set it up, we brought him to this suite in Mexico City, so we thought we were these rich players. He believed I was an American trafficker that he was going to work with to get kids, and I brought the first one, the 35-year-old who's playing the role of a 12-year-old. Yeah, so I still do undercover work occasionally, and when I feel like I should, and so I got to take some measures because I've been out in the press and stuff. You wouldn't recognize me, right? You wouldn't know. I have eye fillers too. I changed my eye color too. That wasn't the complete disguise. But we have prosthetics, and I have prosthetic scars I can put on my face. So this guy, he had no idea. But we get this party for him, and he doesn't want to talk. He's scared to death, which we knew he would be, which is why we set the hotel near a huge park in Mexico City, because he wouldn't talk to us in the party because he's scared. He's the most wanted pedophile in the world. So then I just need to ask him one question. The Mexicans already got him. They got him on gun possession, child exploitation material, all sorts of stuff. They did a phenomenal job. I just wanted to get him to talk to me. So I could only ask him one time, where is Martin and Leslie? He knows I would do my due diligence if I'm going into business with him, and these guys are public figures. But I have to wait, because if I ask him twice, I'm too curious. So I waited till we went down to the park, and I watched his body just relax. And he turns to me and he says, "I now know you're not a cop." And right when he said that, I thought, all this effort just to bring you to this emotional place. And I said, "How do you know I'm not a cop?" And he says, "Because you would have arrested me in the hotel room." I said, "Yeah, I would have." Again, all part of the plan. And then he said, I also know you're not a Dutch assassin." I think I looked a little bit like a Dutch assassin. He says, "I know you're not a Dutch assassin because for the same reason, you would have killed me up in the hotel room, not in a public park." I said, "You're absolutely right, man. I am who I say I am." And so a few minutes later, I knew I could go for the kill shot, and I asked him, "So where are those guys, Leslie and Martin? I read about them." And now he's relaxed. He knows I'm not a cop. And he says, "Well, they run a sex hotel." And I knew exactly what he was saying, a child sex hotel. How do these kids now get into the market? We know how they get taken. How do they get distributed? How do they get sold? This is a very common way. These pedophiles will set up a home, a hotel. People will come in, pay top dollar, and engage in sexual activity. And these guys were after little boys. In fact, if you were 11 years old, you were too old to be in this sex hotel, 10 years and younger. We believe there was a couple hundred that had been there. So he's telling me this, and I said, "Well, I'd love to go to that hotel." He's like, "I don't know you well enough yet. I can't take you there." I said, "Well, have you been there?" He says, "Yeah, I've been there." And I said, "Good. That's really all I needed to know, because I'll now find out where it is, because we're raiding your house tonight." I didn't tell him this. This was in my head. "We're raiding your house tonight, and your passports are going to be there, and I'll find." I said, "Well, how long were you there?" He says, "I was a bartender there for about 2 months." I said, "Oh, perfect. There's not going to be more than 2 countries where you were somewhere for 2 months." Sure enough, we raided the house that night. Are you guys familiar with our Canine project? It's one of our favorite projects. We're basically pioneering this concept. We have these ESD canines at OUR. We've deployed 100. We hit our 100th dog. We have one here in Utah. His name's Flash. He's out of Woods Cross PD, and he covers the whole state. We're trying to get another one because we're very busy. In the last 6 months, Flash has done, I think, about 30 child exploitation warrants here in Utah, and he's amazing. These dogs, what they do is they're like bomb-sniffing dogs. They're like bomb or drug-sniffing dogs, right? But they smell, they hone in on a little chemical that's inside every microchip of every... Oh, we have 5 minutes left? Oh, man. Oh, man, I'm in trouble. So we can go to the parking lot after. Just kidding. Anyway, we used one of these dogs that was just finished, the only dog that we own, and he just finished his training. Again, a total miracle, total godsend. And He was available. We took him in. He found 4 hidden devices in that house in Mexico, with I think about 3 terabytes of material. So this guy's gone, right? Our intel unit then, it just took him a few hours to find. We got the passport. Ecuador was the country that he had been in. And so we looked in we did a deep dive in the dark net and all through social media and found that Leslie, he made a mistake one time, used his real name on an Airbnb ad, a guy named Leslie, which is not a Latin American name, obviously, and was advertising a little boutique hotel in a little village on the beach in a town called Canoa in Ecuador. Canoa was the site of a horrible earthquake in 2016 that killed hundreds of people, maybe thousands. So it was a very vulnerable community, and obviously a place where pedophiles would want to show up and exploit people, kids. So we head over to Ecuador. Also, there's a few countries. We work in about 20, 30 countries, but there's 2 countries that you really don't want to be hiding in if we're looking for you. And one of them is Mexico, and one of them is Ecuador. And that just happens to be where these guys, again, you just see heaven's hand over this whole thing. So we go down there, and you saw the footage. We got a warrant. Again, I have to recognize God's hand one more time here, because when we got to the hotel, 50-50 chance. Is it them? Probably, maybe not, who knows? We got there within an hour of setting surveillance up on this little hotel. We see the faces pop out of the window, walk out of the door of Martine and Leslie. So it was a positive hit. But we didn't have enough evidence per the laws of the land of Ecuador, and I'm glad they have laws, but we didn't have enough evidence. And I frankly agreed. There wasn't enough evidence to break the place down and go into that house. And so we're gathering, we're trying to get more intel. I mean, we just discovered these guys, what can we do? And right then, the second hour of day 1 of surveillance, 2 other guys come walking out of the house. They were the next guys on the list we were going to look for. They just happened to be visiting and abusing children at the time we showed up. And they took their computers, and we tracked them to the Guayaquil airport. They flew to Miami, probably maybe to set something up here. But we called Homeland Security, our friends there, and they picked them up, found evidence of child exploitation material. They were wrapped up. They're now back in jail in Holland. And we got the evidence we needed in like a little window to get the warrant for the hotel. And you're clapping for God right now, because that was nothing but a miracle. How could that happen right then? So we were able to breach the house, go in. You saw we had cameras on the cops. And then at that point, there was about 400 children that we have so far identified. We've never seen something like this. We have actually set up an aftercare home in Canoa, in the village itself, because almost every child there has probably been abused. But the really good news is the prosecutor reached out to us a few weeks ago, and he said that when we hit that hotel, I remember seeing it was in a state of rebuild. They were renovating it, and the prosecutor confirmed these guys hadn't really even launched the business out yet. They had just kind of tested it. So, I mean, the timing, it was God's timing. It was before they finished it. So we prevented probably thousands of children over many, many years of being exploited in this little remote village. And again, I go back 4 months earlier. I finally get home from this operation. I'm skipping a lot of cool details, but you can watch the docuseries. And I remember sitting in my living room just kind of decompressing. I looked over and saw my wife doing all the things. You know, we have 9 children and just craziness all the time. And I started just crying, looking at her, because I realized something. That, I mean, she was much braver than me. Can you imagine sending your husband, and you have 9 children, into a war zone without really a really clear objective, just because she knew the Lord was telling her to send me to do that? And it just didn't hit me till 4 months later what actually happened. This beautiful, the biggest miracle, the most beautiful miracle of all of them, was that she didn't even know. She couldn't articulate why, but God knew that there were 400 plus children and thousands of targets streaming out of the sex hotel in Canoa, Ecuador, and other victims in Mexico and maybe around the world. And he knew that they were there. And he knew that he just had to tell one of his daughters to send her husband to Ukraine and that he'd take care of the rest. And that was the biggest miracle of all. The most important fruit, I think, just as important, maybe in some ways more, because of the numbers of kids that could be hurt, is what we discovered when we dug deep into this literature of this political party, compared it to what's happening in NAMBLA. And it was shocking. It's this big reveal. I'm almost finished with a book called The Child Trap, which will be coming out in a couple months here. And it's shocking. It's shocking what's going on. So what we did, we identified 7, we call them the PNDs, the pedophile network doctrines. This is what they write about. This is not, hypothetical, subjective. This is what they are preaching and have been preaching. Pedophiles organized around the world have been preaching these doctrines for decades. Here they are. Just put them all up. So the child abuse is always in the name of liberating the child. This is not about me. This is not about my lust as a pedophile. This is about the children that need to be liberated. The LGBTQ movement, they're the enemies unless they let the pedos join. In other words, the pedos want to eliminate the name pedophile because that's derogatory. Good thing it's derogatory. It's a warning. You say that word because it means something. It means children are going to get hurt. But let's change the name. You know what they're trying to change the name to, right? The minor attracted persons. They want LGBTQ MAP. And they write about how the LGBTQ movement, if they don't let the MAP add, then they're the enemies. And for the most part, the LGBT movement is not letting them in. Some of my friends who I follow, an amazing group called Gays Against Groomers. And go follow them, go learn about what they're doing. Like, you're not gonna come in here. We are not gonna be part of this. Parents are the enemy. They write about parents being the enemy unless they let the pedos have their children, and they provide all sorts of techniques and tactics that you can use as a pedophile to separate a child or gain the trust of a parent, all sorts of things. 4, provide an excess of sexual content to children. You gotta fill their heads with sex. You gotta get them to want the sex. Of course, again, in their literature, it's all about liberating the minds of these children. But give them sex, give them porn. Now, we know what porn does to an adult brain, right? It's a drug. It creates a very similar chemical reaction, almost an identical chemical reaction. It's an addiction, and it creates brain damage in adults. Can you imagine what it does to a child's brain that's a sponge? If you give a kid some cocaine at 2 years old, they're screwed for a long time, but forever, because their brain's going to take. It's the same thing. You're giving them porn this early, especially. Their brains are going to congeal and form around that. They're sex addicts by the time they're 12 or 13. It's exactly what the pedophiles want, don't they? That's what they're trying to do. That's their intent. Normalize the adult-child sex relationship through legalizing child exploitation material. And adding new terminology like minor attracted persons. Hide and disguise the harmful effects, including scientific evidence that their agenda might have on children. For example, what's happening with the science on pornography. There's a whole movement. All right, look at Fight the New Drug here in Utah. They're just slammed by the academics, even though it's completely scientific. Dr. Don Hilton is one of the foremost experts, brain surgeon, neurosurgeon. The science is in on this, but they're denying it, okay? And then, of course, number 7, they actually write it in there, you must remove God from any education. Because, of course, God is the great protector of children. And they're fearful of that. Now, this might seem kind of obvious. It might seem kind of like, yeah, I expect pedophiles to do this. But take a second look at this. Do these doctrines look familiar at all? Every single one of these doctrines is being promoted by the godless woke in this country. I'm not conspiracy theory, okay? I'm not saying that they're pedophiles. I'm not even saying they're talking. I don't think they necessarily are even talking. I'm sure it's somewhere, but that's not what this is about. This is not some conspiracy. There's a darker power orchestrating this whole thing, right? And so they don't have to be talking. But whoever is promoting these ideologies, these doctrines, even if it's your sweet grandma, she needs to be dealt with. So I don't care who it is. It doesn't matter. It just so happens that right now, it's the woke in this country. As I walked in, I heard Al talking about taking the power away from parents. One of the scariest ones is number 6. I'm going to elaborate on that and then I'll finish up. And this has to do with I call it the trans-foist, I guess you can call it. And I'm going to get canceled for saying this, but I don't care. And stop caring about getting canceled. We're all going to get canceled if we're going to stand up with Jesus, so just let it go. I don't care I'm pretty libertarian. I don't care what adults do. I don't care. That's between them and their God. And I don't care. I love everybody the same. I'll work with everybody. This is not about that. This is about children. This is about children, and it's about foisting upon them a woke agenda where if they're feeling depressed, and I know you've talked about this. I know that you've read the book by Abigail Schreier, right? I mean, she's progressive, right? She's a feminist. She used to be someone whose ideology you would fight, that we would fight, and now she's on our team because she's like, what is going on? Like these young girls are feeling depressed or whatever, and they're just told the therapists are told, right? You can only diagnose one thing, gender dysphoria. You can only tell them that they're in the wrong body, okay? And that's bad enough because it ends in horrible things. Irreparable damage is the name of the book because they're now mutilating children, giving them puberty blockers and so forth. But that's not even what I'm going to talk about right now. There's something deeper, darker, and scarier than that. And it's this. There are some things that are even more fluid than gender. And gender's not fluid, I'm not saying that. But age is more fluid. I know this on a personal level. I adopted 2 children from Haiti. They were trafficking survivors. They've been my children. They're home for 4 years. I don't know how old they are right now. I don't know. We didn't know. There was no paper. I knew they were a girl and a boy. That was pretty obvious. I didn't know how old they were. Age is more fluid, right? Why is this scary? I've been telling people for a while, and I'm seeing it happen now. It's just a matter of time, and we've already hit it. I actually sent an undercover researcher, into one of the biggest transgender conferences, and I said, just take screenshots every time age is put up on the board. And she was blown away. It was almost every presentation. Age is fluid, age is fluid. Guess what that means? That the 13-year-old girl you got them sexualized. You know the content. I mean, you know what the woke are trying to give our kids. You've seen the book, like It's Perfectly Normal, that book that's everywhere, including in our public libraries. And I mean, there's people here who know more about that than I do. But the kids are getting sexual material through public schools is the most obvious thing in the world. That's not even debatable. And it's porn. I mean, I've seen things that teachers are giving kids, especially in California, that we would probably arrest people for back when I was an agent in California for distributing harmful material to minors. And now it's not just illegal, it's encouraged apparently. So the kids are getting the sex, they're getting addicted. Now by the time they're 12 or 13, now what? Now the pedophile's getting, hey, you're not only in the wrong body, but geez, you're the wrong age. I mean, don't you identify as a 30-year-old? 12-year-old kid? Don't you identify as a 30-year-old? Well, yeah, if you tell me I do, because I do whatever you tell me, teacher union and Mr. Therapist. The only ones that can keep their license are the ones that aren't going to go anywhere else. So you're right, you're 30. In fact, I might be a 40-year-old pedophile, and shoot, I might identify as a 10-year-old. Now, what are you going to do when mom and dad say, whoa, 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 you've crossed the line? You can't do it, mom and dad, it's too late. You've bought into it. You don't want to be a parent. You want to get an award for letting your kid be a cat. I mean, you heard of the furries, right? There's kitty litter in certain schools, I understand, here in Utah, because the kid wants to be a cat, and the parents are getting awards and they're getting praised. You know, they pretend they're fighting against the man. No, I'm going to get canceled. You're going to get an award for letting your kid be a cat. So mom and dad at this point, and teachers and anyone else who wants to now stop the pedophiles from grabbing your children in a legal way and sexually abusing them, you've lost your argument because you've given it up. You've just said the science doesn't matter. If you say that the gender fluidity is real and species fluidity is real, how can you possibly say that age fluidity is not? You've lost. And the kid's gonna say, Mom, I mean, you already told me. How can I not? I'm 30. It's over. And the laws are congealing around this concept. You know this. The laws are congealing around this. And it's just a matter of time. It's just somewhat prophetic, but it's happening. It's just a matter of time, in certain states especially, where when that kid says, I'm not only in the wrong body, Mom, I am 30 years old, and my boyfriend is 50. And he identifies as a 12-year-old lion anyway, so it doesn't matter. And there's nothing you can do, because the laws are going to have the backs of the pedophiles who've manipulated those children, and that's the end of our civilization. Because these are the leaders. Do you think it's a coincidence? Every great republic that ever got to the age that we are at right now, they died. The Romans, Greek, and they all had pedophilia legalized at that last moment, at that last epoch, because the kids are now gone, and they become the leaders. And then who's invoking the covenant on this land? This is the fight that we are in, and we're in it together right now, and you've got to stand up. There's a silent majority that can see this, but we've got to stand up, and we have to fight. The adversary has put kids. I didn't think this would happen, but kids are now at the center. They are the target for the darkness that's affecting our nation. And it's you, it's Eagle Forum and like-minded people that need to stand up, and I thank you for doing that. And I pray the Lord's blessing on our joint efforts to protect these children from this evil, dark ideology. So let's go do it. Thank you guys, and God bless you.
I guess you don't need to know what he thinks. I think you all know that now. I got a call from Tim a few months ago, and he asked me if I could come and talk to him. And when I did, and what he wanted to talk about was what we're working on, what we're talking about today, just stopping the puberty blockers and the cross-sex hormones and the mutilation of the children. He said he wanted to join with us and help get that bill passed. And so let's all work with Tim Ballard and get that bill passed. So I got a call just a few minutes ago, and Burgess' plane is about to land, so he'll be here before long. But Congressman Blake Moore is here. He's chatting with Tim. Everybody chats with Tim. But we are so grateful because we know what they've been through this last week. I don't know if any of them were able to go to bed last night. They've been fighting the battle. And and so we appreciate the fact that Congressman Moore is willing to be with us today. Thank you so much, Blake. Thank you for coming. I know you've got to be really tired. When's the last time you went to bed? I didn't think so. Anyway, thank you so much for being here, and please share with us. Everybody, you know, I don't know if we told you this, but before you got here, we had a Zoom yeah, and they were just getting ready to get on the plane, but they Zoomed in first, and you got off the plane and came here, and we just want to thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yep,
thank you so much.
Oh yeah, let me get this. Well, it's always good to go after Tim, but any stories I had from this week will be very boring to you all. So we can probably skip over a lot of those. I'm actually glad that Chris and John, Reps Stewart and Curtis were able to address you and share a little bit about this week. I don't want to belabor it to any degree. Thanks for helping, reminding everybody I'm on about 45 minutes of sleep from last night. We left the house floor around 3 and I had a 6 a.m. flight, so anything I say from here can obviously be excused by the 45 minutes. I'm gonna talk to you all about what my main thing is, and I'll get into that in just a moment. But other sort of senior members and mentors of mine back in Congress have said to me this constant saying of, and one guy says it from a very Mississippi drawl. He says, you got to keep the main thing, and it always it's just in my mind all the time. With so much going on, it is very important to figure out what your main thing is. And I'm really glad that my main thing is actually something that I communicated in a swath of 3 particular items when I was first running for Congress, and that I've just really tried to zero in on one of those, and it's debt and deficit. And you've seen me speak before, you've potentially come to a convention or something. Folks, I am never going to be a very good rah-rah, get a lot of applause when I speak. And you learn a lot about yourself when you enter into the foray of politics, and that's something that I've learned about myself. And I'm just gonna own it. So I don't plan many speeches that have the right type of applause lines and things like that, and maybe I develop that, and maybe that's something, but I wanna authentically speak to you about, what ultimately got me into this was a massive concern from where our debt was going to take us in the future. And before I do, I just, my 3rd time addressing you all. It's the 3rd consecutive Saturday that I'm gonna make my son's Little League basketball game. Very proud of that. That's gonna happen again today. That was part of the getting on the earlier flight than the later. Chris and John always joke with me, and Burgess does too. They always joke with me like, hey, you're a dad, we're grandpas. Both very important roles, but there's a difference in how the timing works for this job and where you have to put some of your priorities. And they've done so much for me and helping me with covering a lot of things, so I could fulfill that role. Being a dad is different than being a grandpa, and that's the single hardest thing about this job for me is that timing and what I have to miss. I went into it full well knowing that was going to be a problem, so I don't need pity for it, but it is one of those constant things. And so as you continue to interact with me and as I continue to build trust with folks, know that I have a DC schedule and I have to be in Washington, DC for this. And then the next thing that goes on my schedule is my kids' Little League game. So when Gail reaches out, I say, I will absolutely be there. I just can't give you the time until I know the kids' Little League schedule. So thanks for bearing with me on so much of that. To summarize this week, I will say this and share just a little bit of context. And I told a lot of the freshmen, I said, you're actually quite lucky. You're coming in this way. 2 very eventful starts to Congress in the last 2 years. I hope if I'm successful and get into a 3rd term, we don't have this, but I would take a very boring week at this point. But I looked at the freshmen, I said, you had a lot of opportunities. We're on the floor for hours and hours and hours with only one simple vote where you just have to stand up for 4 seconds and do your thing. Go and interact with people and build some relationships. This place is so much based on relationships. And so I got a chance to do a lot of that this week. I did my very first primetime cable news interview. I've written op-eds, submitted them to places like Wall Street Journal and Examiner, and I've tried to really communicate heavily through writing and local media. I would rather go on a local radio station to kind of share context than do the national stuff. But I was asked to go on, and I was able to do a first primetime interview. And I was talking to Jim Jordan about it, and I was a little nervous to talk to him about it because nobody's done more, major primetime cable news interviews than him. And so I was like, gosh, I'm really minor leagues here. But I said, yeah, I kind of shared a thought, and it felt like the right thing to say, that, as this plays out, Republicans don't always just fall in line. And Jim looked at me and he goes, oh my gosh, that is the message. And I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool, right? Like I finally got through to him. Maybe he's gonna parrot that or repeat that a little bit. But it's sincere. Republicans don't always fall in line. But I said on the interview, for better or worse, right? For better or worse, Republicans don't always fall in line. I saw in my first term, many Democrats that I worked with and was on committees with and interacted with, like really disagree with the amount of spending that was going on in that term. And they would try and they would push back and they would try to get to that point. But ultimately, as you saw most votes in the House of Representatives for the last 2 years, even though they were the same narrow margins we have now, pretty much everybody fell in line. And we're not gonna have that. And folks, I'm here to say that is still a good thing. I would have preferred that we come together a little sooner this week, not to get home early or anything. I think we needed to show the country we're ready to do that. There have been months and months of work going on to this. I felt there was some grandstanding that took place, but the majority of those 20 that we're holding out, I got a chance to really dive in with many of them, and I know them to be sincere. And so I've got a better relationship with folks across the board because of this, but we don't always fall in line, and that will ultimately lead to better outcomes. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about. There's only one major thing that I lament from what took place this week, and that was that Speaker McCarthy's record on fiscal responsibility actually got distorted a little bit, and I've been very open about that. And I want to just share a little bit why, and talk about it in the context of what I'm trying to do with respect to the work on debt and deficit. When Republicans had control of Congress, with a Democrat president even, from 2011 to 2018, our discretionary spending didn't just stick to inflation. Like oftentimes federal budgeting can just be the same year over year, but you just add a tiny little bit and you justify it and you allow for inflation. There are many things that do that. There are many corporations that do that type of work. Republicans, when we had the control and we were in the majorities, we overall reduced spending. We didn't just curb it, we didn't just keep it in check. We reduced the total number. Go look at the discretionary spending from 2011 to 2018. The total number went down over a 7-year period. I mean, this is the thing when I go to town halls and I hear, well, I mean, what are you gonna do when you get in the majority? Because when we had the majorities before, we didn't curb spending. And it's the most frustrating thing in the world because I'm like, no, look at the data. Look at exactly what it is. When we had control, it went down. McCarthy was in leadership during all that time, right? We will be able to put discretionary spending and clamp it and get it to the point where we can, at best, keep it in check while there's a Democrat-led Senate, but not let this continue to increase. We've done it before and we'll do it again. But the problem and the debt drivers of our nation do not come from discretionary spending. This $1.65 trillion bill that just passed, that has all of our defense spending. It has our homeland security spending. We as Republicans could have done maybe $150 billion better on this. But this is not where our debt drivers come from. Unfortunately, our debt drivers come from all of the mandatory spending, right? And this is the part that I implore everybody to just to engage with me on this and help understand what the real trouble is with respect to our spending. I'm gonna just do a 25-year example. Should have had this on a slide, had 45 minutes of sleep, forgive me, maybe next year I do that. In 1997, mandatory spending was $1 trillion. Today, in FY23 budget, it is going to exceed $4 trillion. Okay, so in 25 years, our mandatory spending went from $1 trillion to 4.1, 4.2 trillion. That's what's projected for this year. Our discretionary spending, what gets referred to as the omnibus or appropriations bills, was about $600 billion in 1997. Again, I use 97 because it's 25 years, but it's also the last time we balanced the budget. It was $600 billion, and today it's $1.6 trillion. So if you look at the growth rates of those two, from 1 to 4 versus about 600 billion to 1.6, the growth rate is significantly higher on our mandatory spending. And of course, this is Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and other mandatory programs that exist. Kevin McCarthy, and this is why I will have his back on anything fiscal related, he did more than any other person in our conference for the last 2 years to push us away from any bill that was going to add programs to mandatory spending. Because one of the tricks that Speaker Pelosi loved to use was to tuck more spending into the mandatory budget. Why? Because we don't have to vote on it every year. These are programs that get authorized and then they just exist and they get put in autopilot, and then there's more room for other type of spending. And so there are a few bills that were really hard for me to vote against this year. Very, very hard. They were veteran related. I believe that we need to move more manufacturing away from Taiwan and get it back into the United States. But both of those bills use that trick to tuck things into mandatory spending. The veteran one was actually quite egregious. And I went and met with my veterans groups because I had my mom was out putting a sign up for me one time when they campaigned, and an individual drove by and said, look, I'm never going to vote for Blake again because he didn't vote for that bill. And my mom was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. He always talks about veterans. He's so supportive of Hillary. Like, everything he's doing has been on the military and the armed services, and he's done so much work there. And I actually got to meet that individual because he's part of one of the veterans groups. And I went and sat down and I explained to them what happened. And I left in a very positive way. So when you take a tough vote, I'll show up and explain it. And I'll do my best to give you the context. But Kevin McCarthy did more to push us away from that type of stuff because he knew when we got in the majority, we now have a tougher job because of all of that that gets put into mandatory spending. And that is, folks, that is where our debt drivers are. And these are not easy fixes. These will be things that will be very difficult. But as I've pushed and I've how would you say, you try to present yourself in a way, you try to communicate to the conference where you want to serve and committees and everything. And I'm going after what is considered the most influential, because it has the most jurisdiction of legislation, on the Ways and Means Committee. We've never had a Republican on the Ways and Means Committee from Utah. We had one Democrat in like the 50s. Senator Orrin Hatch always served us well on the Finance Committee. It's comparable in the Senate, but we've never had anybody. And I'm going after it, and I really, and I've got support from the delegation. I've got support from many in the community to do this. And it's because that entirely focuses on mandatory spending. And so as I go and interact with these steering members and the individuals that will decide on what the committee membership is, I just look at them and I say, look, I figured out my main thing. When I came into this, I was saying, you know, I'm going to support Hill Air Force Base. It's a huge part of the 1st District. I am going to be somebody that reverses our debt culture, that fights to reverse our debt culture. And third, I want to be an inspirational, positive, optimistic, conservative voice for the next generation. I never turned down an opportunity to go onto a college campus and talk to them about the reality over the rhetoric and explain what conservative principles do for our nation, right? And so I'm still married to all 3 of those, but the thing that I see as our nation's biggest issue is what every single poll that I do for my constituents comes back, and that's debt and deficit. So the fact that I can marry up my direction and the sentiment from my district means the world to me. And I say to every one of those individuals, I say, look, I'm missing a lot of Little League games. And so I'm going to be working on the main thing. And in order for me to be on the main thing, I need to be on this committee. And it's sincere, and I'm going to go and after. I don't have all the solutions for it. Medicare Part A goes insolvent in 2028. Social Security goes insolvent in 2033. For too long, our Congress has always sort of like, okay, it has to be done. It's now the time, and we're going to do it in the 11th hour. And I don't want that to be the case on all these things. I want to find the right types of solutions to go and address these things. Because those numbers, those dates, folks, that's not hyperbole. That's not rhetoric. That's not anything other than just simple math. And I am so focused and dug into that. It will never get a big applause line, right? But I want you to know that that is my main thing. That is my focus. And I'm going to do everything I possibly can to get our debt to GDP ratios brought back down and strive to get to that balanced budget. Everybody wants it. Everybody says it. We have to get our debt to GDP ratios down from historic levels, and we have to be able to put a plan in place that gets us to a balanced budget. And you look at the history of our nation, and I actually take a very historical perspective on this. I'm not a historian. I didn't major in history, but I've taken this this financial side of my passion to look back at our nation and look about, okay, we've had, we've had way more years without balanced budgets than we have with them. But what's different right now is that for every 6 to 10 or maybe 8 to 12 years, we always got back to it. We always got back to a balanced budget. We've had surpluses at certain times. Something would happen, an infrastructure, a war, or something that was needed would take place, and we would lose it, but we would get back to it. Folks, it's been 25 years since we've been able to do that. And that will continue to erode trust in our financial markets, in the US dollar, and eventually, if the US dollar is not the world reserve status, then the pending issues that come from so much debt topple on top of each other. It becomes much, much worse. It is my thing. I am going to relentlessly focus on it, and would love it if anybody ever wants to engage. I went to many town halls and I talked about this. I put together a debt and deficit task force before I even had the idea to be on this committee. And this task force is a group of mostly northern Utah, Ogden area, business people, economists, lawyers, accountants, solid home builders, everything that we really are relentlessly focused on. We've put actual recommendations on that highlight 4 things. 1, we need to grow the economy. We're doing that. The Tax Cut and Jobs Act did that. But the Tax Cut and Jobs Act did not address the major spending issues and the reform that were needed. And there was a plan in place to do that, but we lost the majorities, and we need to gain those back. We have to win the Senate in 2024. We have to maintain our majority in the House, and we have to win the White House back. That's the best chance we have. I will be working relentlessly to make sure we can do that. There are things we can do in the meantime, though, and that's part of my framework of budget process reform. This new rules package that we have in the Republican conference is going to leverage the debt ceiling vote that's pending to be able to get some of these reforms in place, and I'm hopeful to be a big part of that. We have to save and strengthen the mandatory spending in our nation's vital programs, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. We have to save those. We have to strengthen them. They are set for fiscal cliffs, and we have to get them in the right order. And the last is the Focus the America Spending. Now, when I talk about that, that's the discretionary bill. We can do better. We have to do better. We have to focus that spending. Republicans have a track record of doing that when we have majority, and I hope to see, and we're gonna work towards doing that again. It's be tougher that we don't have the Senate right now, but we're gonna go after it, and we'll be able to do that better. But I'm gonna keep the main thing. I'm gonna continue to keep engaging you all on the realities of this debt issue, because I know how important it is to your minds and every constituent's minds, because I get the feedback. I want you to know that that's what I'm back there championing and fighting for, along with everything else. But that's my passion, and I hope to sincerely engage with you all on it. If you just Google Blake Moore debt, don't worry, you're not going to run into a bunch of problems that, my wife and I are not in debt. It's okay. It's my recommendations, and it pops up as one of the first or second hits. Blake Moore debt. It's about 8 pages, 8-page document that will truly explain what is going on and what we can be doing about it, because I want to always bring solutions. So thank you so much. I appreciate your involvement and your willingness to spend a whole day listening to a bunch of people talk. I hope I didn't drown on too much about it. I do get going a little bit on this debt topic. But as I continue to build trust with folks from all walks of Utah, I want you to know where I'm really working. So Gail, thank you so much for putting all this on. It's not easy, and I appreciate the chance to speak to you.
So I got a text a few minutes ago that said that Burgess is on his way. So what we're going to do is have Marianne Christensen come up and talk about lunch. I mean, we all like to talk about lunch. She's going to explain a little bit about picking up your lunch and what's going on with that. By the time she finishes that, hopefully Burgess will be here. So then he'll speak, and then you go have your lunch. I just want to express again my gratitude for all of you being here. It was very nice that you were also supportive, and we sold out several days early, and a lot of people have been trying to get tickets, and so hopefully next time we can be in a little bit larger place. But I did want to tell you this, that we were able to send out a notice to people everywhere, letting them know that this is being streamed right now on Facebook Live, and it will be all day. So if you know somebody at home that'd like to see the rest of it, let them know, send them a text and say, hey, go to Eagle Forum's Facebook page, but we have two, so, yeah, go to the page, not the group, and that's where you will be able to watch it on Facebook Live. Also, it's recording there, so everything that you hear today will be there on Facebook. You can go and watch these again, share them with your neighbors, also on our YouTube channel. We don't charge for these things. They're just there available for you to use and share. So I wanted to share that with you. And then Marianne's going to talk about lunch. And she's going to be she gives the announcements. So, and then after that, hopefully Burgess will be here.
It sounded to me like she just gave me permission to talk till Burgess got here, however long that is. Okay, first of all, I have a black binder thing that was left at the front desk, and it will be at the front desk for the owner. You're all excited about lunch. That's a little while away still, but we'll take this opportunity to just let you know that it will be out these doors. It's the furthermost tables this way down the hall. And they're going to have the table set up so that we can make 2 lines down both sides of the table, and then you'll pick up a bottle of water on the other side of the hall. We have, for choices of lunch, they're all boxed lunches: roast beef, ham, turkey, and avocado. And then we have a few lunches for people with dietary concerns, like if someone is gluten-free or vegetarian. We have a limited number of those, so please don't take those unless you really have a dietary concern. The restrooms, you'll go back down to the front desk where you checked in, take a hard right as soon as you get past that desk, and it's a long hall. Just keep walking down the hall till you're at the end, and that's where the restrooms and the drinking fountains are. I also wanted to point out that many years now, we've done a drawing for people who visited our vendor tables. There's little slips at all the vendor tables that when you visit, you can pick one up, you can put your name in and then drop those off at the front desk, and we'll put you in a drawing. And I forgot to bring the picture in. We have this picture. The picture of the American flag over here is one of our finer drawing items, as well as some gift certificates and theater tickets. So make sure that you visit our vendor tables during the lunch hour when you have time to do so, and pick up these tickets, drop them off at the front desk. Also, when you make a donation, you will also be handed a ticket that you can write your name on, and you can deposit those for drawings also. In your packet, speaking of donations, in your packet is, I've got a whole pile of, in your packet is a little page that looks like this. It has several QR codes for Eagle Forum. So the 2 codes on the front are for if you want to make a payment with a credit card, a donation, you can do so through PayPal using a credit card. The bottom one is our Venmo QR. And on the back are just 3 QRs for information that you'll find on our website. We have a lot of information on our website. We just chose 3 of our most visited pages. The top one is our Eagle Eye blog, where we put things that are going on, especially at the Capitol that's coming up. The middle one is contact with live links to their emails. And the last one is information about Teen Eagles and interns. I'm going to be talking a little bit later on this afternoon about our intern program and encouraging you to share information about that with teens, because we are putting that together now that convention is over. Also, you'll find these in your packet. You'll also find them all around the venue. These are our pass-along cards, and the purpose of these is to share Eagle Forum with other people. I've noticed that this year there's a lot of new faces here, and all of you can share about us and bring even more new faces. It's really important that to have more influence, we need to grow our numbers. So that's what they're for. If you will please, you can find these on our website too. On the back of this are our principles. These are just what we believe in a really short bullet point form. If you share those with people and they agree, which most people do, then guess what? You're an Eagle. So I hope that you will grab some of these as you're walking around the venue, grab some, share them with neighbors, friends, family. Get them interested in us also. Next year we'll have to book the Salt Palace or something because we'll be so big. Gail, as long as Burgess isn't here, do you want me to talk about a little bit more about what's in the packet now? Okay, a few items of interest in your packet. When you open it up, the right-hand side are things that have to do with Eagle Forum, our organization, and how we run. I've already talked about the card and the codes. There's also information about Eagle Forum in our brochure, and some issues that we care about, like CRT and the whole diversity, equity, and inclusion umbrella that CRT is under in the schools. You'll find an Eagle Forum report. This comes from National Eagle Forum, and one on the Great Food Reset that we're going to be discussing today, and another one on ESG, also a subject for later on today. So that will help you get more information and really great articles that you can use. You'll find a page on a lot of what you heard about the transing of kids and how terrible it is on the handout that looks like this, a picture of kids at the top. Underneath that is looking forward to the legislative session. There are a lot of things that we need to prepare for, and you can be part of that. You can be looking at those, but I think this afternoon I'm going to take another few minutes to talk about the legislative session specifically. And so we will go over those a little bit later on this afternoon. The other side of the left side of your packet are handouts that our vendors have given us. So for everything that's on the left side, there are vendor tables out there to give you more information, and I hope that you will make it worth their while to be here today by going and visiting their booths and exploring some of the things that they've brought for us today. Thank you.
Well, I just got a text that said he's here, so while we're waiting for him to come in, I want to explain this over here, this painting, this beautiful painting. This is by our artist, Kendra Burton. She's given us things before. She is just amazing. I love that picture right there of the flag because you can actually see it waving. It's just amazing how she's done this picture, and I just appreciate it so much. There's other things that will be part of our drawing too. You want to stay till the very end because that's when we do the drawing. And like I said, the picture, of course, is such a highlight, but we've got amazing gifts. We've got tickets to the Hale Theater, which if any of you'd like to go there, you know what a great opportunity that is. And so we'll have a few of those, and then we've also got some Hickory Farms things. And so stay till the end and listen to all the good speakers and be here for the drawing. And so we have the congressman here now, who I really appreciate it. You can come on up. So we have Congressman Owens. Yeah, this will need to be taller. You're right. So I know what you guys have been through. Have you, no sleep, but we want to hear all about it. We want to hear about you and all the great things that you're doing and all the family things that you do that we love so much. And thank you so much for coming and not going home and go to bed.
Hi, everybody. How you doing? Well, it's been a kind of crazy 24 hours. Who tuned in last night? Let me tell you what you're watching. True democracy. You're seeing transparency. You're seeing debate. You see people trying to make sure we can articulate our thoughts and come to a common ground. And you saw us come to a common ground. That is what democracy looks like. Tell you what we've seen the last 2 years, actually, as long as Pelosi has been in. It's called dictatorship. You don't know why. You don't know why it's so much in harmony, because if they're not, she takes them to the guillotine. Is that it? Guillotine? Guillotine. Thank you. I knew there was something wrong with that. No, let me tell you the difference in our two parties. And I think everybody here understands this. We are a people that's entrepreneurial, innovative. We think outside the box. We have our own dreams, and we have our own passions. And we should have also the courage to speak about what those are and get people to come our way. The other side is very much a collective. You have one person with an iron fist, no velvet, and if you don't do it her way, she's going to get rid of you. She's going to primary you. She's going to take money away from you. It's what's called, it's true bully and coward, because she sits in her little office, very safe, in a very safe seat, dictating to everybody what she wants to happen, and the people that believe in her, the people that listen to her, guess what? They get they go out of office. They get voted out. And so anyway, what I'm excited about right now is you guys are going to see something coming in the next couple of years. It'll be very exciting. Let me do this first. I have first of all, I'm going to talk about this book a little bit later on, Battle of the American Mind. Please write that down, parents, grandparents. It's one of the best books, game-changing books I've read in quite a while. If you want to know where our educational system is going, why we're where we are, why I can come up and grow up in the environment I grew up in, a very focused educational environment, one in which we respected mom and dad, we respected our teachers, and we expected to have a good name by going through and being successful in life. But that's changed up, that's been turned upside down because of the educational system that the cultural Marxist has been putting into place for quite a while. So I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. When we get back on Monday, we're going to put together our rules. We'll come together as a conference and then make plans of what we're going to do together as a team. And I'm going to stand up and give them a little bit of a Raider story that I've never really told anybody, so you guys will be the first group that will hear this little Raider story. But it goes to the power of loyalty, the power of team, and the power of conciliation, coming together at some point. When I was 30 years old, I was traded to the Raiders, and I know you young people in here have no idea what it is when the Raiders just win all the time, but they used to. And it was a team that of second chances, a team of guys who just had no place else to go. They were too old, too rambunctious, too wild, too crazy for all the NFL teams. It was just right for the Oakland Raiders. And I was traded to the Raiders from the Jets. One thing about that process, when you go to one team, is there's a loyalty for those who've worked together and fought together for years. And I'm the new guy on the block. I don't know how many of you guys remember Jack Tatum, but I was going in to take Jack's spot. They had traded Jack away and they'll bring him in. So obviously, coming in as a new guy, and those who respected Jack, who were loyal to Jack, weren't too really happy about me initially, particularly someone like me who came in not sure if I'm going to make the position, so giving everything I had to give, not worrying. I mean, I hustled. At the end of the day, I was there to win my position. And sometimes that's not too popular with guys who feel a little bit more comfortable and don't want to hustle quite as much, particularly at the end of the day when you have the sprints. You guys know that when you're doing those, you're just going to kind of pace yourself. Well, I wasn't pacing myself. So what happened is there was kind of a rift between me and one of my teammates, Mike Davis. And to be honest with you, it's 30 years old, the last time I've ever came close to having a physical altercation with a teammate, because we just were butting heads. And after after practice, we had this film process, and so I said, Mike, let's take a walk. So Mike and I took a walk down the field. We talked going down. We talked on the way back, and we realized we had a few things in common. We wanted to win. He was loyal to Jack. I was loyal to my family. If we were loyal to our team, we had the one thing in common that made sure we can respect each other and move forward. Mike ended up being one of my very, very best friends, because we got to the point where we started to see that we were contributing our part. And the way we hustled was helping the team. And as the team continued to win, we got closer and closer and closer. That's what you're going to see with the Republican Party. We're a team of diversity. We're a team of passion. We have folks who want to make sure their voices are being talked and shown and represented. And what's been happening for decades, the office of the speaker has become so powerful. Give an example, so powerful that we can go in as freshmen, we have something called markup. We're talking about the unemployment enhancement. You guys remember that back in 2021? We talked about unemployment. Well, they were putting together a bill. It was very obvious. We sat up we worked till 4 o'clock in the morning saying, listen, if you put this bill through, people will be making more money not working than working. If you put this bill through, the economy, as it starts to come back, will not come back strong because employers can't get people to come in to go to work. I mean, all the things we now understand has happened, we saw it then. We put together 40 amendments. Not one of them was even considered. Every single one was turned down 100%. Why? Because we had a leader, Pelosi, that told her people, do not bring anything else to the plate. What I put together is what you guys are going to vote on. We're going to change that. What you're going to start seeing now is things coming from bottom up, where the membership will have a big play in what's going on, and you're just going to see the results of that. You're going to see something that also is very unique on the Hill. There's a reason why our country's been turned upside down, because we've had too much elitism on both parties that dictate what they want, not what the people want. And of course, they don't have to deal with the consequences. They don't have to worry about bad schools for their kids, because their kids are going to go to good schools. They don't have to worry about inflation because they make enough money that it really doesn't hit them that much. They don't have to worry about their business going out of business because they don't have a business. So it is interesting we have that kind of power pushing down policies. We wake up one day and find out there's a $1.7 trillion bill sitting on our doorstep that's rushed through. Those days are changing, because what's happening with our conference is we're going to make sure, first of all, that we plan out for the year. And I won't get into all the details. I'll just say this. We're not going to have these last-minute omnibus bills. We're going to make sure the Senate knows there's a certain date that you need to give us this bill by September. And if you don't do it by September, we're going to do a CR. It's going to take us through the following year. A continued resolution. So we have right now a party of representatives that represent the people. And I'm just not talking about the Freedom Caucus. They're very conservative, but it's also moderates. You have to understand, we did something pretty significant this last go-round. We brought some of these Biden districts over to our side. And we're going to continue to do that, because Biden's going to help us. He's a mess. He's a pure mess. And because of the misery he's bringing to all us people, our people, I don't care what side of the aisle we sit on, none of us like misery. Americans like hope. They like vision. They want their kids to be safe. They want to say, I'm going to go to my job, and they want what we all want. And Biden is showing how that other side looks. So that being said, we're going to be able to have every one of the different, I'm going to say families, the different families represented on these committees. Now, why is that important? Because if you have moderates and conservatives together in committees, when it comes to the floor, it's been worked out. We can trust each other. We can say, okay, I can now vote on this because we had our representation, our voices put into the process, as opposed to fighting it out with no one not having a voice in the committee, coming out and not trusting the end result. I hope I'm not getting too deep, guys. Are we okay so far? Okay, good. Okay, let's get to why I'm super excited about us taking control. Education has to be my passion. It's interesting. I'm one of those guys who never thought, never considered running for office, never, ever, never. And then once I did and then won, I said, well, the committee I want to be part of, I don't know if it's how it is set up, but I want to be part of education. Right now, I'm the ranking member for pre-K through 12, which is it's a sweet spot I'm realizing now, which means as a subcommittee of the Education and Workforce Committee, which means this coming year, I'll be the chairman of the pre-K through 12. And it is a place, that's where our battle is. That is the sweet spot. That's where the cultural Marxists are going after our kids. That's where they're grooming them. That's where they're turning them into little Marxists. And they've been doing it for a long time. This is what you have to understand. We think CRT has just come around recently. We think about critical race theory just came around. No, they've been going after this for 100 years because it's a long-term fight. It's good versus evil. People are interchangeable, and it's intergenerational. We happen to be part of that generation that has woken up, though. I'm telling you guys, we are blessed. We're blessed to be that generation that we understand, we see what's going on. We can see that our kids are being attacked. And we sit in meetings like this and say, I can do something about it. So just know we're going to look back on time and say, thank goodness I was born when I was born to understand what I've understood through the past. My North Star is based on the raising the community I was raised in. So it's not hypothetical for me to be in a community like this that believes in faith, family, free market education. I grew up in that community. It's very easy for me to fight for this community because I grew up in that community. I knew what it was to come as a kid, even though it was a segregated community, to love our country because our dads had just come back from World War II, to respect mom and dad, respect, matter of fact, any elder. If you saw any woman being disrespected, men didn't sit around and take pictures and videos. No, they man up and they became part of that solution. It didn't matter what the color of that woman was, how old she was. And once we get back to respecting womanhood, our culture is going back in the right direction. We got to do that. So that's how I teach our young men how to do that, and that's going to be part of the process of this education. Okay, I won't take too much more time, but I wanted just to say a few things here. Our future is going to be based on how well we teach our kids our history, the values that came out of that foundation, those remarkable men, imperfect, but allow themselves to be a conduit to a perfect concept, one in which we can become a more perfect union. What we've done as a nation, the way we started, is not by accident, and we all know that here. There's a God in heaven who's always wanted people to be free, and this country was chosen to be that right place. This country was chosen for thousands of years. No one had found it, protected by two remarkable big oceans and two free countries on both sides. We have every climb you could possibly think of around the world. And it's amazing to me when I think about my past, growing up in Tallahassee, Florida, playing with the Jets, playing with the Raiders, living in Philadelphia for all these years. Whenever I land, I say, thank goodness I live in Utah. This is unbelievable where we are. We're blessed to be in such a remarkable state where innovation, service, empathy, family, a state that literally believes in balancing your budget. How about that one? I mean, I tell you, this is unique, guys. So just know that we are very, very blessed to be Utahns, number one, to be Americans, obviously. But it's now up to us to make sure we're leading the charge and taking our culture and impacting everybody else versus everybody else impacting our culture. We have to make sure we're fighting for that. Okay, let me do this. I'm going to tell you what my legacy, I figured out what my legacy will be just, gosh, I think over this last few months. I sat down with my team, matter of fact, to go through this. Can I do this real quick? So many of you guys don't know my background. I do want to share with you a little of my history just so you can see where I come from and why I'm so passionate. I grew up in the 60s, the days of KKK, Jim Crow, and segregation. You guys remember the movie Remember the Titans? Well, that was my story. I was one of four blacks, to integrate this all-white high school. My sophomore year, 16 years old. And we fought a lot. It's interesting how far we've come, because in those days, race was everything. I mean, it's amazing how now I can come to an event like this. That's the last thing we really think about. You hear me, you know I'm black, but that's not what comes to mind initially right off the bat. It's what do I stand for? What are my policies? Those are the things that we think of because we've come so far. Well, in those days, color was everything. The thing about that era too, though, this is what's important. Even though we were segregated, and every community was the same way, by the way, Italian, the Jewish community, the Polish community, the Asian community, everyone was in their own communities. We had not assimilated like we're doing today. But you know one thing we all had in common? We loved this country. We were proud to be Americans. We believed in something called meritocracy, which basically said this: if you want to command respect, you go out there and work harder than the next guy. If you want to command your respect to be a good American, you win. You raise a good family. You raise a successful business where people want to show up. You get yourself educated where you can articulate yourself and pass that down to your kids. That was all part of command and respect. And my parents were all in. My dad was a college educator. He taught at Floyd A&M for 40 years. Mom was an educator. One quick story. My dad's example of that generation. He came back from World War II, lived in Texas, could not get a postgraduate degree because of Jim Crow laws. Now, I know a lot of young people don't know what Jim Crow laws, but it's basically if you're black, you just can't do very much. I ran across a box of letters when he passed away, rejection letters. When he came back from the war, he wanted to get his postgraduate degree. And all across the North, all these colleges were turning them down, the rejection letters. I saw a big box of rejection letters, but this is what I gleaned out of that. Dad had never pulled that box out. He never said, look, Burgess, this is what they did to me. They did what every American did in those days. Tell them that they can't, and they're going to show you why they can. And that's exactly what they did. They dug in. Not only did he get accepted at Ohio State, he got his PhD at Ohio State. He went on 5 years later, we're living in Liberia, Africa, because he was doing a research project there. We had a remarkable middle class, because in those days, my community, my race, which you have not heard about because the left does not want you to hear about this. That's what this book's all about. Karl Marx said very simply, the first battleground is the rewriting of history. If they steal our history, they steal our pride in our past, our appreciation for our present, and our vision for our future. And boy, are they good at stealing. That's what happens when you have evil that takes away people's dreams. So they don't want to tell you that because of those things I just talked about, a commitment to faith, family, free market education, it was a black community in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, you hear this first, that led our country to growth in the middle class, led our country men matriculating from college, led our country men committed to marriage, over 70%. Up until 1970, black women could predict being married on a higher rate than white women because we believed in family. We believed that men should stand up and take care of their kids, be a good example, give a good name. We also led our country in the percentage of entrepreneurs. If we are segregated, guess who has to commit and provide for that community? Black people. And because of that commitment, there was Speed grocery stores, Perkins service station, Baker's Pharmacy, a black hospital, a hospital with black nurses, black doctors, engineers. I saw success everywhere around me. Was it then a stretch for me to say I'm going to be a marine biologist when I went to college? No, it wasn't. Because I saw and I heard you can do anything you want to if you're willing to work hard enough. And if it's tough, work harder. So that is the history of our great community. It's also the history of our great country. And what the left would love to do is separate you from our history, from our truth, and define us in a totally different way. And we're not going to let that happen, my friends. Our culture is too deep. Let me just say this, and I'm going to kind of wrap this up. What we saw, I was two Monday nights ago, was it last Monday night or Monday? We saw the young man that got injured on the field. What we saw as a result of that, the time stood still. Now, I don't watch NFL, by the way. I gave those guys 4 years ago. I'm tired of wokeness, so I don't watch them. So I didn't know about this young man, but I also tuned in like everybody else. I was actually in DC, and my daughter called and said, "Dad, did you see what just happened on the football field?" Guess what Americans did across this country? We all paused. We all started praying. There's a son who gave funds to his GoFundMe that works with kids. Every mind and eye of good Americans turned to that young man, even though we didn't know him, because we had empathy for someone who worked as hard as he did through meritocracy and moving forward. That is America. So let me just say this. We're going to get some great things accomplished. Just keep doing what you do. Be the state that you are. Be the place where we can go out and represent, be bold, take the hits in DC, and come back and get pats on the back. It's like a battery charge. It really is. So keep being who you are, and we'll continue to fight for you. We have a remarkable delegation, my friends. We're friends. We have different personalities. We might not vote the same way every single time, but we have the same end game. We want Utah to win. And we want our country to win, because Utah wins as a model. The rest of the country knows what it looks like. So I want to thank you, Gail. Thank you so much for the invite. Thank you guys for your patience. And as Al Davis used to say back in the old days, who remembers what Al Davis used to say? Just win, baby. All right. Take care. All right. Thank you.
Okay, and I'm not going to move this, but I have to make a comment that when Burgess talked about the fact that, you know, what an issue it used to be, you know, the color of somebody's skin, that color was such an issue. But now, you know, we don't even think about it. And I have to tell you, that is really the truth, because when we were talking about, when first started really talking about critical race theory, and I thought, I got to have somebody come on my radio show and talk about critical race theory. And I thought, well, who I need to have is somebody that, you know, somebody who's black. I mean, let's have them on the radio show. And then I thought, and I said, but I can't think of anybody that's black. Thought about it for a while, and I thought, oh, forgot about Al. And I called him up. I said, Al, I need you to be on my radio show. And I forgot all about the fact that you were black. So, but you know, that's the way it is. Thank goodness that's the way it is. I just am so grateful for that. I'm so grateful for these good men. And so Marianne forgot, she has to tell you a couple of more things before you can go get your food. And get your food and come right back in, because we will continue. We're right back on schedule now. So I want to tell you that, everybody, we're on schedule, so get your lunch. Enjoy your lunch. We'll be starting back. There is one change in the afternoon. I had to change out Janae Stacky and Bobby Clayson, just reverse them because she had a plane to catch. But everything else is back on schedule and the same.
I even had a list and I forgot. Really, really important. Your lanyard is your lunch ticket. So don't go out to get your lunch until you have your lanyard on you. And everyone should have one. If you don't have one, you need to come and see me, and I'll hang out up here until we get any problems worked out. We have a lot of people in the venue today that we were not able to sell tickets to because we're just packed wall to wall, yay. But, so you need to make sure you have your lanyard. Were there any questions? Did I see a hand? Yes. Yeah, every time you visit a table, you get a slip of paper. So I think we have 19 vendors, so you can put into the drawing 19 times. So, okay, thank you for that question. And now we're going to turn the time over for our lunch blessing to Bruce Williams. He is our Vice President of Chapters.
Our Father in heaven, we are grateful for the opportunity we've had to enjoy the speakers that we have witnessed this morning and the spirit that has been here. We are grateful that we still have many speakers to listen to. And at this time, we have the opportunity to partake of some wonderful food that has been acquired for us. We ask you to bless that food, that it will strengthen our bodies throughout this day and give us that energy we need to continue to fight for the freedoms that we need to preserve in this country. We do so in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.